Test, test. Good morning. I'm looking for eye contact with our fantastic administrative team. I'm getting the thumbs up. So I welcome you all to the public hearing of the Finance, Revenue and Bonding Committee. And I look to my co-chair. Any opening comments, Mr. Chair?
Let's see, it could be finished by 10. You think that's possible? Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Good morning, Senator Martin
Good, thank you.
and Representative Cheeseman.
Ditto what Senator Fonfara said. Thank you.
Excellent. Very eloquent crew today. So with that, we will kick off with Representative Gresco, the good chair of the Environment Committee, who has a few things on his agenda today, I think.
Well, and I appreciate the indulgence and letting me cut the line, as they say. Chairs, ranking members, Finance Committee members, State Representative Joe Gresco, 121st District, here to speak in favor of Senate Bill 1236, but with some points. The Environment Committee has a similar bill, SB 895, with a fiscal note of 11 million plus in one-time costs. Add to that, the percentage of the sheets kept by the industry increases quicker than the timeline spelled out in the bottle modernization bill, which will cost the state as well. As it stands, SB 1236 is a courtesy to the industry of banking funds getting ready for the increase to a dime redemption value. I understand that. Customers will hoard their returnables to get double the money come January 1st. I don't know about you, but I am doing it. It was a refreshing change of heart by the industry after many years of opposing any bottle bill modernization that did assist with passage. The industry has been paying the increased handling fees to redemption centers and grocers. No question. Thank you. This is what's spurring on the additional redemption centers opening. If the industry continues to cooperate going forward in adding new material they create for potential redemption, working towards the almighty 100% recycled content, and most importantly, in my mind, the redemption rate in the state of Connecticut going up over time, I have no problem with this courtesy. However, if the industry reverts to past strategies, not willing to take responsibility for the end of life of the product they make decent profits on, rather leaving municipalities holding the bag, or in this case, the bottle, this arrangement would probably need to be revisited. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Gresco. Do you have particular suggestions about how we might keep an eye on that in the future to make sure that we are achieving the ends and that this modification to the bottle bill works as intended?
I would say just keeping an eye on our overall redemption rates, which we are plus or minus 50% now. Of course, with new materials now being redeemable and people not knowing about it quite yet, the actual redemption rates will go down. That's why I said over time. Once everyone gets used to redeeming the iced teas and Gatorades and coffee drinks and the like, then hopefully the redemption values will go up and we'll be good to go. But if that redemption value percentage doesn't increase enough, then we need to think about what we're doing here. The ideal is to try to get these products reused. The industry is telling us they want their old bottles back. So these redemption centers will get them their old bottles back. During our testimony, it was highlighted, hey, this bottle is 100% recycled content. That's what we were working toward ultimately. And if the industry figures out a way to make some money on that, God bless them.
Well, thank you. And I personally share your goals and applaud you for, I know what was a very difficult process for getting us to where we are today. So any other questions for Representative Gresco? Seeing none, thank you and have a great day. I suspect I will see you later, as will some other members of the committee. Very good. Next up, we have Eric, is Eric Russell with us, treasurer? Yes, online.
Yes, I am.
Proceed, Mr. Treasurer, welcome.
Well, thank you. And good morning, Senator Funfair, Representative Horn, Senator Martin, Representative Cheeseman, and members of the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee. Thank you for this opportunity to testify in support of Bill 1235, an act implementing the Treasurer's recommendations concerning the Investment Advisory Council and related statutes. Apologies for not being with you in person today. I'm traveling currently, but I do want to note that I'm joined by Ted Wright, who is the Treasurer's Office Chief Investment Officer. Thank you for raising this important bill, which makes some important improvements to our ability to attract and retain talent at the Treasurer's Office and enhance the capabilities of the Investment Advisory Council. Also to improve investment outcomes, which is the most important for the state's pensions and trust funds. In order to maximize our returns in the Connecticut retirement plans and trust funds, we depend on our staff of highly specialized investment professionals. Under current law, the Treasurer is authorized to appoint a number of senior investment officers whose compensation is set within a range approved by the Treasurer and the Investment Advisory Council. But compensation for other investment officers and support personnel is established through the Department of Administrative Services, even though the compensation for all pension fund management personnel is borne by the pension fund, not the general fund. As I'm sure you're aware, the hiring market is challenging, and attracting top talent is a top priority for our office. Restricting my office's capacity to offer market-based compensation packages hinders our ability to compete with other entities, including other public pension funds, in hiring and retaining the best investment professionals possible. And studies consistently show a correlation between retention and stability in staffing with better investment performance and higher returns. This bill allows us to hire and retain the best candidates, benefiting Connecticut's pensioners and taxpayers in the long term. The same is true for the sections of the bill that revise some of our Investment Advisory Council policies. As you know, the IAC was created to assist and advise the Treasurer on investment policy and strategies, asset allocation, and performance benchmarks, among other high-level investment and shareholder policy issues. To be most effective, its members must have the appropriate expertise and experience. And we're very fortunate here in Connecticut to have such a wealth of investment knowledge and talent and experience to tap into. But under the current statute, there are limitations which have prevented us from being able to attract some of that talent. This bill eliminates some of those unnecessary restrictions, which act as barriers to attracting these qualified investment professionals, and removes time-consuming responsibilities that crowd out discussion on strategic policy issues. So overall, this bill will enhance the IAC's ability to effectively carry out its mission. So I will end there in the effort to meet the goal of ending at 10 o'clock. But thank you for your time and consideration, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer, and you have excellent goals. I have one question. I wonder whether you could, whether you have information that talk about where Connecticut is with compared to other states. How do other states handle the qualifications, for hiring, investment advisors compared to what restrictions Connecticut puts on?
So there are two things here. I think one in thinking about the compensation side and what we're looking to address there, I would just say that we are not as competitive salary-wise as many of our competitors. So, I guess not competitors, but other public pension funds. And so what we're really looking to do is to be able to not setting the market or paying above it, but right now we're currently below the median. And so we're really looking to have a more competitive salary in order to attract and retain the right investment personnel within our staff. And, because of that, I think, and several other things, this is a piece of a much larger effort and things that we're doing to build, a culture of excellence within the investment team, really building redundancies and expertise in several different areas. But compensation is certainly a piece of that. On the IAC front, it's a little bit different because we're structured somewhat differently than some other pension funds. But what I would say the point here is what we're looking to do is to get closer to what we do with other boards and commissions right now. So currently the restrictions for members sitting on the IAC are significantly more heightened than, say, boards and commissions. And I always use the example of the Connecticut Health and Educational Facility Authority. If you have a member of the board who has a conflict, works for, say, a bank that's going to be involved in an upcoming transaction, that individual would recuse themselves from any involvement in that transaction. Currently, there isn't an option to do that with the IAC, and so we end up excluding a lot of potential members because of conflicts.
Thank you for that. Other questions? Chair Funker?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Mr. Treasurer.
Good morning.
Thanks for testifying today. In your testimony, you indicated that the folks who participate in making decisions or recommendations on investments, that it was in the best interest of, as I think you indicated, best interest of pensioners and taxpayers. Is ever a consideration given to, in that process, and certainly not in counter to that process, but in that process, the consideration for investments that could help the state of Connecticut and our residents?
Certainly. So there are a number of factors that we weigh in when making investment decisions. I would say first and foremost, I have a fiduciary obligation to make sure that we are maximizing returns for pensioners. And so that is obviously the leading charge of our office and is our primary goal. But there are several other things that we factor in, and we, as part of our due diligence process, are asking questions around the impact on climate and whether or not our investments align with our values as a state in terms of whether it be investment in the community or moving away from investments in certain things that we feel are damaging to our communities, social impact, governance procedures. And so we certainly are weighing all of those options. And I think particularly coming into this office, my goal is to align our values, again, within that fiduciary obligation, but align our values as much as possible with our goals as a state, and seeking out every opportunity we can to make significant investments in our state and in our communities.
So, for example, right now, you and your office invest hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in the short-term investment fund, and you invest, and this is not new to you under your term, but going on for years, invest in banks and institutions around the world, but not much, frankly, not any in the state of Connecticut. So I wonder how that does the folks that are going to be affected by this bill, do they consider how investments in Connecticut could be made under that particular instrument?
Sure. And so I'll turn it over to Ted at some point to weigh in on this. But I would say first, I think we do, part of our portfolio, we do have invested and it's kind of focused on right here in Connecticut, a specific program. I think that's to the tune of 25 million, I believe. But I think, I think separate and apart from this bill, which is really about our overall, allowing us to build out a more professional and just high quality investment team. I would say that our goal, whenever there are opportunities, is to invest right here in Connecticut. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Ted.
No, I think you said it really well. I mean, we first and foremost, our North Star is to maximize returns for a given level of risk for the benefit of the beneficiaries here in the state of Connecticut. So wherever there are opportunities, clearly, if there's something that meets those goals and it's resident to Connecticut or somehow nexus to Connecticut, we will certainly take a very, very close look at it. But again, the ultimate thing is to maximize shareholder value for the pensioners.
But that's not exactly true, is it? Since you've indicated, the treasurer's indicated that you have made decisions, your office has made decisions to disinvest in certain potential opportunities for reasons that you've indicated, whether it be environmental, social justice. So if you're making decisions to disinvest, that indicates that you're not necessarily maximizing returns, correct?
Well, so I would just say that we can do both. So anytime that we've made a decision to divest, and I can use the example of civilian gun manufacturers, there was extensive research and work done around this. There was outside opinions that were received before that decision was made that ultimately said that this divestment was not going to have a negative impact on our investment returns. I think that's one. I think the other piece is that anytime that we have actually made a commitment to divest from any particular sector or industry, those are steps that we've taken through the legislature, and there's been authorization through the legislature to do that, and we've done that in tandem. So it's decisions that we make around investment decisions, even when there is effort to kind of step away from things that we think are harmful. Usually that is because there is a risk profile that's attached to it. But the North Star has always been maximizing returns.
I don't disagree with your position when it comes to disinvesting in some of the areas that your office has. My question is more about, do you consider investing in Connecticut in underserved communities as an example? Do you put that through the same review that you have with respect to gun manufacturers? And in terms of whether maybe, because there's a difference in my mind between maximizing return and having a disinvestment or an investment that is not going to harm pensioners.
I agree with that they are two different things. I think in thinking about investment opportunities, and again, I think those are weighed when we're looking at potential opportunities to invest directly in Connecticut. Those decisions are still being made based on what is going to maximize returns. I think we factor them in, and if we look at opportunities where things all being equal, we would always look to make the investments right here in Connecticut. And I think to the extent that there are ideas or opportunities how to do that or find opportunities to invest here in Connecticut directly, we are more than open to that. I think the divestment conversation or kind of some of the more ESG factors, I think are a separate thing.
In that vein, I look forward to having further discussions with you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Likewise.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Cheeseman.
Thank you very much. It's good to see you all here today. Question, and this was not in your testimony. I believe it was in Ellen Schulman's. She cited, I believe, 10 different states where, because of the longevity of the chief investment officer, they were seeing excellent returns. And I gather Connecticut's had 10 over the past 20 years. So I know we have Mr. Wright in currently. How does your suggestion to allow you to have more leeway in terms of paying those more junior investment officers, how do you see that affecting the chief investment officer? Because I presume his pay or her pay is not dictated by these very tight guidelines.
So what we're essentially doing is looking to align investment personnel and investment officers and their compensation within the same structure that we currently have for the chief investment officer and deputy chief investment officer, so those bands for compensation would be set by the treasurer and by the investment advisory council. I think where some of this would really be helpful to the chief investment officer is being able to provide opportunities to have more longevity. So a part of this is compensation. The other thing is that there's a lot of, there are restrictions right now around being able to create positions within PFM and really essentially creating a ladder for the talent that we have within the office to move up. And so one example I use regularly is we have a fantastic analyst in our pension fund management group that actually started in the office as an intern. And right now, with the way that kind of the positions are set up within PFM, there aren't those steps for her to be able to take to move up within the division between analyst and investment officer. And so what we've seen is that we lose a lot of talent that we would like to keep within the office because of one, compensation, but also just opportunities for there to be that upward mobility within the division.
So do you see this creating additional positions or simply allowing people currently in the organization to progress upward? I mean, are you going to have to create a whole new tier, which would indicate you're going to have people lower down and replacing them? I accept that you're going to need to be able to pay more to attract the best. On the other hand, I am concerned if this results in a tripling of the staff you need simply for the sake of creating an upward progression. Again, I don't have to tell you, even though this is paid for out of the funds, you need to be a good steward of these dollars that are coming in. So I'd like if you could explain a bit more about how this would play out simply in terms of sheer numbers.
Absolutely. And Ted, feel free to jump in. I think the goal right now is not to increase the number of positions, but I think even if you think about someone who's an analyst now who has the skill set and who we want to see develop, being able to promote that person to, say, an associate position instead of an analyst, where they're getting better experience, we're able to compensate them better. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to have to fill that analyst spot if they're still serving that function, but it's creating the opportunity, or it's creating the flexibility to change some of these titles and positions so that people see their path moving forward. The other thing that I would say that's just a note on compensation when it comes to the investment talent here, having the right talent in place and being able to improve performance, even in very small ways because of that talent, these investments have the opportunity to pay off for pensioners in a massive way, right? And so if you think about the entire investment team and you say over some period of time, whatever adjustment to make salaries more competitive and slightly above the median, say we increase salaries by a total of $500,000 across the board, right? A very small kind of adjustment in performance has the ability to bring back hundreds of millions of dollars in returns to our pension funds. And so I would just say, understanding that I think we are very mindful of making sure we are running as lean and as efficient of a division and office as possible. Making some of these investments also has the opportunity to have some really significant returns.
Okay, thank you. As I said, I accept that you need to be able to pay to get good people and convince them to stay. I would be concerned if this resulted in 2 more tiers that tripled or quadrupled the number of staff.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Cheeseman. Seeing no further questions, thank you again, Mr. Treasurer, for being with us this morning.
Thank you.
Next, we have Christian Johnson from Wyndham, who is with us in the room. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. I'm from the town of Wyndham. I'm the finance director for the town of Wyndham, and I'm here to speak in support of bill number 1234. The M1 reports for Wyndham, Wyndham District Number 2, and Wyndham First Taxing District were filed incorrectly for reporting period July 1st, 2022 through June 30, 2023. This resulted in District 1 and District 2 receiving no motor vehicle tax reimbursement grants in the governor's 2024 recommended budget. In order to correct this mistake, we are requesting legislative bill number 1234 to receive the motor vehicle grants for the two districts estimated to be $178,921 and $1,008,517 in FY 2024 respectively.
Thank you, sir. Very, very clear and succinct. Seeing no questions, again, I thank you for being here with us today. Next up, we have Anthony McDonald, also with us in person.
Greetings. Thank you, Senator Fonfara, Representative Horn, Senator Martin, and Representative Cheeseman. My name is Anthony McDonald, and I'm the Executive Director of the Schubert Theater in New Haven. And I'm here to speak today in support of HB 6919, an act establishing a tax credit for certain pre-Broadway and post-Broadway theater productions. I'm speaking on behalf of the 6 performing arts centers in our state. We have a vibrant arts economy here in the state of Connecticut. From Stamford to New Haven, Hartford, Torrington, New London, and Waterbury, we are the home of the 6 performing arts centers in our state. Today, you have the opportunity to help us be competitive with states like Rhode Island, New York, Maryland, and maybe Massachusetts by approving this bill and providing our industry theater tax credits. It will allow us to attract shows not just to perform here, but to come to this state and build the show and spend weeks before they ever perform in front of a live audience. Why is that important? Every season, there are 25 plus tours that go out on the road. All of them have to start somewhere and be built from the ground up. That process is called teching, or the technical rehearsals for a tour. That process can take anywhere from 2 to 8 weeks of time, depending on how large that tour is. During that time, a tour of 50 plus people will come into our community to build that show. Those individuals will stay in our local hotels for those weeks. Each individual will receive $1,000+ in per diem each week to spend in our local restaurants, our local businesses, and shops. And in turn, they create an ecosystem that doesn't presently exist without these credits. That ecosystem is not just for these individuals, but also members of our community who are part of our local stagehand unions, who benefit from the ability to work for several weeks at a time compared to a few nights a week. In turn, they are driving to our theaters, parking in our parking garages, and with these increased wages, they're also spending that right back into our own economy. With these credits, this ecosystem can expand further by allowing our world-renowned scene shops that build sets already for Broadway and TV shows and the sort to also be competitive with New York scene building shops to allow us to build these sets right here in our own state, further expanding and allowing
30
our
seconds.
Thank you. Further expanding and allowing our trucking industry to bring them from Connecticut right to another theater in Connecticut. Lastly, our communities get to benefit by allowing our children and our students to come into our theaters to experience what's happening on the inside of our theaters, further expanding their education they're already receiving in their classroom. In closing, these theater tax credits attract shows to come into our state to help our local economy, the labor force, and further enriching the lives of young people. You have the power to have Connecticut be the destination rather than just a pit stop along to a neighboring state. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. I have a couple of questions about just this industry as a whole, meaning the pre and post the tech productions. Does any of this happen in Connecticut now at your theater or other theaters in Connecticut?
It does, but sporadically. This past year, we did tech 3 different shows. One of them being one show that had 2 national companies, and they came in March of last year, when in many ways they had kind of run out of their options, because that's the problem right now, is that we're not at the top of their list. We're near the bottom because other states have incentives that they can offer that we can't currently. But they came in March. They had an amazing experience because we have amazing stagehands and we know what we're doing. And in turn, they came back for their next national tour later in the summertime. So that's how we were able to get them to come twice, basically in 1 year with 2 different tours. In addition to the third one being already a nonprofit on Broadway. So in many ways, this incentive wouldn't have helped them, but that was the thing. They knew that there was no incentive out there for them as a nonprofit. So they chose us anyway, because once again, we know what we're doing.
And do you think, how many, like take your theater in particular, how many of these productions do you think you might be able to attract with?
You know, I would probably say anywhere from potentially 3 to 5 a year at least. And I say that because right now we have several advantages. From one, our proximity to New York, where a lot of these tours start in the first place. Our local stagehands have been doing this for so long that once again, the industry knows that we have quality folks working in our communities and within our theaters. But the problem once again becomes when I have New York, when I have Maryland, when I have Rhode Island, I would love to come to Connecticut. But once again, how can you help me make it better financially for us? And so between the 6 of us, with Waterbury and the Bushnell in particular, being the 3 of us that do primarily Broadway tours, I do believe that we could have a little more sustainability and predictability to be able to get these tours versus it being very sporadic and being kind of disjointed in our efforts, because once again, we're trying to compete in a way that we just can't amongst these other states.
Thank you. And I know, having had one of these theaters previously in my district, although it's been edited out of my district, I still feel connected to it. And I am familiar with the hardship that they've been through over the last few years. So I guess my last question is about, I mean, if we were to do this, obviously it's because we're interested in the growth that it would produce and the economic benefit that it would produce for Connecticut. If we were to ask those, theaters such as yourself who participate in this tax credit to give us the state, some sort of data to demonstrate whether this tax credit is working, what would that data look like for you? What would demonstrate proof of concept to?
Well, I do have some data on me. And I can also provide that to you all if you would like to see some of that data from other states that already have tax credits. I also have the data that also shows what we did last year. In addition to that, I think when you can have 50 plus people stay in a hotel and take up that many rooms, it's easily all of a sudden a $200,000-$300,000 kind of influx of cash into that one hotel, because once again, rooms are not that cheap in our world. And when you're talking about 50 rooms for 3-4 weeks straight, that's kind of an economic impact right there for the hotel industry. When you're talking about 50 people now who are getting $1,000 a week, $50,000 in 1 week, but they're here now for 3-4 weeks and they have to eat somewhere within our world, that's all of a sudden now maybe $200,000 being pumped into our local economy just because they have to sustain themselves and also get to a chance to explore our communities while they're here for such a long period of time. The payroll taxes alone, once again, one of the first weeks within our first tour last year, the local stagehands in my theater, their salaries came up to around $165,000 in that 1 week alone. Couple that then with the production side of things, where they're also having probably roughly a similar number of stagehands that's working for them. But once again, money being spent in our state that they're going to be paying their payroll taxes to this state. All of a sudden, it kind of all adds up to literally hundreds of thousands of dollars that's being spent here that would not be spent if we don't have access to bring these tours to our state alone. And so I would be able to share these numbers with you if you would like, to hopefully kind of also just put some context around it as to what numbers are we really talking about.
Any additional data that you have that you haven't already shared with us in your testimony, please feel free to send to the committee administrator. We can share with the committee as a whole.
Will do.
Representative Farrar.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Hi, thanks for being with us today. Great to have you.
Thank you.
I really appreciate you all giving more information kind of to the real picture of what this looks like for our theater companies. And I have to say personally, Representative Horn and I were talking earlier in the week. Some of my earliest memories are on the stage at the Warner Theater as a child. So I certainly understand a lot of the work that you all put into this. I did have kind of a couple questions following up on her questions. I couldn't help but notice in your testimony, you mentioned that, you know, there are these other states that have provided certain incentives. Number one, do you have information about what those incentives are in New York, Rhode Island, and Maryland? That's my first question. And then secondly, have you heard from production companies that the decision of not coming to Connecticut is actually due to those other states' credits?
Yes, I can answer both of those questions.
Thank you.
The first question being, it is theater tax credits that is the incentive that these other states have that right now Connecticut does not have. New York State has a 25% tax credit that they can offer to theater companies that will not necessarily perform in New York City, but in New York State itself. So folks are places like Elmira I always hate saying this word, I can say it right, Schenectady, I think is how they say it. Yeah, I can't say it great. But they have theater performing arts centers that these tours will go to, and they will launch their shows there. We actually lost one of those shows to New York State when they adopted their tax credits. In the early 2000s, Jersey Boys had teched their tours right at the Shubert Theater, I think twice. But after that, New York State adopted tax credits and they left Connecticut, they left the Shubert to go there because once again, they had something to offer that we could no longer offer. Your second question was?
Do you have do you have other information about Rhode Island or Maryland you mentioned?
Yes.
Yeah.
To expound upon the first part, Rhode Island has a 30% tax credit that they can provide once again to their shows that are coming through to them. And some of the data that I have is based upon the Rhode Island tax credit and the kind of help that they provide to these shows after they're done and they come through. So the information that I have kind of shows the amount that was spent in that particular state. And then on the back end, what was that tax credit that they received once everything was said and done. And speaking of the Warner and places like the Warner to the Guard to Stanford Palace, this was one aspect that my colleagues shared with me once this bill was raised and we were able to see the inner workings of it. The problem with the Warner is that they don't have the capability to be able to house a Broadway theatrical tour. However, they do have the capability to still tech other kinds of tours that aren't for Broadway, that was not intended for Broadway, because as we know, there's a whole world of family programming that comes through our state. There are concerts as well, and just other theatrical kinds of presentations that doesn't have anything to do with Broadway. And so if I could humbly request, one of those things that I wanted to ask of this committee was to consider adding a few additional words where we say pre-Broadway to post-Broadway to potentially also live theatrical tour. That would allow this state to now add an extra layer to allow us to attract not just the Broadway shows, which are the bigger aspects, but also non-Broadway shows as well, because the places like the Warner, like the Guard, that don't maybe have the technical capability to do Broadway tours, they can definitely still tech a lot of other things in this country. And instead it allows us as a state then to become the place to tech everything and anything that we possibly can and create, like I said, these ecosystems within our communities to benefit them. So it's not just about maybe the Bushnell, Waterbury Palace, and the Shubert, but once again, the six of us can all benefit from the ability to bring in this kind of opportunities to us and into our own communities.
Thank you for that. I do appreciate kind of knowing a little bit more about New York and Rhode Island. And if you please feel free to follow up with us if you have more info about Maryland. It's helpful to certainly know where we are in the ecosystem. I think my concern generally is always, certainly if we put something in place, we certainly know that our neighbors may then go even further and it becomes more of kind of a competition of sorts and kind of trying to continual tax credit competition. I do want to ask one final question, kind of following up on Representative Warren's comments about data. In the bill, there's reference to some form of reporting to the Department of Economic and Community Development. Do you all perceive that you would be open to, and the other theaters being open to, reporting on the revenues and the particular economic impact that you would see based on these
The
credits?
5-minute Q&A
DCD?
has expired. Please summarize.
I would say yes.
Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Way to close it out. Senator Fonfara.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Mr. McDonald. A couple of questions. One is, you mentioned with respect to that national tour that has come here twice, I guess,
Yes, Six, the musical.
and you mentioned the talent, the reputation, I guess, that your theater or others have. So clearly that trumped the lack of a tax credit in that case anyway.
I would say yes and no. Only no because they kind of called us with about a month of advance notice, because I believe that there may have been somewhere else that they were trying to go that then fell through. And so we became a last resort versus the first stop. And that's kind of the difference with that particular show when they chose us last year. And like I said, we literally had about a month to figure it out, to see if we had the space in our own calendar, which we had to actually move a few things around to make the space for them, versus us knowing months in advance, a prior notice, because once again, they're in the very beginning stages of picking where they want to take that particular tour. And so now they're calling those places 1, 2, 3, 4 first, versus us being maybe 10th on the line.
Thank you for that. I have been concerned, and I'm not alone in this for some time. We're pretty good in Connecticut. If you've reached the age of 31 or better, want to settle down, start a family, own a home. Our suburbs are very attractive, great schools, etc. 21 to 31, not so good. And we lose a lot of folks that we educate, spend a lot of money educating the youth of this state. And then we give them a train or plane or whatever ticket out. How would something like this, and maybe it's unfair to focus so narrowly on your request, but is this part of the kinds of things that young people are interested in? It's not a band, it's not necessarily maybe considered something that young people would list in their top 10 maybe, but maybe you have a better understanding than I do.
I would say it is. You know, it's actually funny you talk about this particular age demographic, if not even younger, because the particular tour that we did tech last year, Six, the musical, which actually played the Bushnell, I want to say just a month ago. It is a show that came from London that it has very pop sounding music. It is not your standard kind of sound that you would expect from a Broadway show. And in turn, that show itself in particular has a very strong tween following. That when I saw the show, because I actually did come out because I wanted to see what it looked like from the Schubert stage to now the Bushnell stage. It's slightly different, but I wanted to see what it looked like, and also getting a chance to experience that audience. And once again, that audience was full of young people dragging along their parents to experience this particular show. And so there are opportunities for us to continue to expand the actual audience base of who can appreciate the world of theater. And it is growing. You know, I know that it's maybe at times thought of as a seasoned, lovely crowd that comes and experiences what we do.
Very kind.
But no problem. But what I'm beginning to also see is when we do shows, as we just did at the Schubert, the Book of Mormon, that was once again a crowd that was very diverse in age, very diverse in ethnicity. And it was a show, a very unique kind of show that really brought out everybody to come and experience that show and have a good time. So it's not always a seasoned crowd that's appreciating the kind of work that we're doing, but I think allowing us to be able to have these tax credits will give us the opportunity to actually bring some of these newer tours, some of these more popular shows that are coming from Broadway to this particular state first, rather it opening and launching in Rhode Island or going to one of our neighboring theaters in New York.
And lastly, in your opening remarks, you indicated that this provision, if we pass it, if it would become law, that you could compete with the likes of New York and Rhode Island and other states. And you said maybe Massachusetts. Why?
Their governor has proposed theater tax credits within her budget this year. And I do believe that they have been trying to get theater tax credits passed for a while. And so that does concern me because once again, we are literally being surrounded by other states that kind of see the importance and the significance of how this kind of tax credit can have an impact and a positive one on their communities. And so if they were to get this and we are still in the middle of all of these lovely states without them, we are literally going to be that pit stop along their journey. So as they leave New York, they're going to literally get gas in Connecticut. And that's all the kind of activity that we're going to receive as they go to Massachusetts or as they go to Rhode Island. And so that is my concern, that it's just going to be even harder for us to continue to make the case that they should be coming to Connecticut without the help.
I wanted to end there, but you just made me think of something else. So the relationship between tech and the show. So just common sense says that the tech would want to be near the show, but you're saying that's not necessarily the case?
Well, I'll try and break it down in a slightly different way. Every tour that goes out generally originates in New York because that's where Broadway is currently, as we talk about the Broadway side of this equation. And so they will begin their rehearsals in New York before they actually go to that very first theater to then kind of perform the tech side of it. So while the actors are rehearsing in New York, the actual production crew is already at that particular location beginning to build that set, to bring in the sound equipment, to bring in the lighting equipment, to begin to literally build it from nothing into the actual show that it's going to be. So that takes several weeks to kind of get all of those pieces together because it's the very first time that it's ever being built before. And so it's kind of synonymous with one another that once they are done rehearsing, they come now after, say, 2 weeks of the technical production crew building the set, building the infrastructure that they're going to be performing on. Then the actors get added, and now you continue to now build upon that. So the actors are on stage, the lighting cues are now being created with them on stage, the costumes are being put on their bodies so they can interact and they can move and act within the costumes to make sure that that's all good. And in turn, by the end of all that, which could be 4 or 5 weeks, then after that is when the actual live performances can now happen. So it's whenever a tour is going out on the road for the very first time is when this kind of production has to take place. And then once it's done, once they perform that very first set of shows, now they go on the road and go place to place for 1 week, 4 or 5 days, out of this 1 week. But now it's because it's already built. So now they know what they're doing, but they have to figure out how to do it before they can go somewhere else.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Not a
Thank you, Madam
problem.
Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Cheeseman, do you have a question?
I did. Thank you. Thank you. This is a slightly off topic of the bill being presented today, but I do think is a factor. I know during the pandemic, among the worst hit were performing arts centers. I often felt, because I sometimes felt very sorry for myself running a children's museum, at least I was not running a performing arts center. Where are you in your recovery phase? And as you rebuild, do you see this as an additional revenue stream that could help you make up for some of those pandemic losses?
Thank you for that question. It is still difficult. I would love to tell you something a little rosier and more cheerful, but that wouldn't be my reality. We were closed for 18 months, as we all know. We were the first one closed, the last one to reopen. And our world got very comfortable with other activities in their lives. And so the 4 theaters, the Bushnell, the Schubert, Waterbury Palace, and Stanford, we experienced a 46% drop in attendance from our 18-19 season, which was the last regular season, to last year. And so that's a real palatable number to us, that more than half or almost half of our audience just disappeared. And we're trying to still rebuild. Yes, this year is a little bit better for most of us, but this is still far from where we were before all this happened. And so it has definitely been a struggle. It's it's been a struggle. So we do see some bright spots. I can't say it's all doom and gloom, but it definitely is not the best picture. And so these tax credits, yes, is in another avenue that can help us generate income in a way that we generally can't do it. Because once again, when some of these different techs that came last year, they spent 19 days or 16 days. And the funny thing is, my entire testimony earlier was about how all the other pieces of our economy benefited. I never once mentioned how the theater benefits, because it's not just about us. It's how these tax credits help the entire economy around us. As we do just being open in general, we can bring folks into our downtown areas that have been severely hit by the fact that the offices are no longer even full. So what other aspects or opportunities are bringing people into our urban communities, in our downtowns, to bring people, to help the restaurants, to help the shops? It is us oftentimes. We are the places that are able to attract thousands of people to come and experience what we have been doing for so long. The Shoe Brothers are 108 years old. It's only 108 because of the community supporting it for all of these decades. And so this is another aspect for the Shubert in particular to become that birthplace of America's greatest hits once more. And it may not be in the same vein of it being a pre-Broadway run, which this actually could help us get back to, but it's also that ability to do this again in a slightly different way after they go to Broadway, to now say, now you have your beginnings once again in New Haven or in Waterbury or in the Bushnell or / Hartford. That's the opportunity that we have right here that really would be a great benefit to this time in our lives and beyond.
Thank you. And I want to thank you, one, for your altruistic testimony, not how this will benefit you, but I think you've demonstrated very ably the case that cultural institutions support so much more, not just the institution itself, but all those ancillary things, going out to dinner and all those pieces. And I think if we accept that our cultural institutions are one of the reasons people like living in Connecticut and make Connecticut a place to settle, that what we can do to support them is something we should look very seriously at. So I want to thank you for your testimony today, and thank you for providing culture.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I
Madam
do
Chair.
believe it would keep those 21 to 31s in our state by helping us show them that they don't have to travel to New York for entertainment and for high quality entertainment, that we have amazing institutions all around them right here in Connecticut. So why leave? Why go somewhere where you're going to spend more money to live in a box, as I did in New York for so many years? I am very happy to have a home here in Connecticut now, and to have a community to actually provide quality entertainment and positive experiences to them day in and day out. So I do appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative. Senator Martin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. McDonald, for testifying. I do have a couple questions regarding your data that you'll be submitting to us. And does the data provide how many entities would be using these tax credits?
Not necessarily how many entities, because it's in many ways dependent upon the ability for us to get these shows to tech here. I think with the overall amount of money that is being proposed of a cap for this particular tax credit, that roughly translates into the ability of having different shows spend upwards of around $33 million in our state. In turn, I don't know what that would translate to, is how many shows that could benefit from that. But I can tell you that with some of the shows that happened at my theater last year, they spent overall for the technical part of their show, roughly around $3 million. That wasn't all in Connecticut yet, but that would be an idea of a smaller tour. So if that was one tour at 3 million, a bigger one that can maybe go to the Bushnell could maybe spend $5-6 million. But you're talking about massive tours that are now coming into our state that never came before. And so if it could easily be 8 to 10, if not more, because if we expand the language ever so slightly to include those non-Broadway shows, oftentimes they're maybe spending $500,000 maybe to launch everything they need to do that can be primarily happening here in our state. In turn, that's not a lot of kind of tax credit back to them. So now you can all of a sudden expand upon the amount of people that could benefit, because their costs are not as high as a Broadway shows will be. And so it could really range just based upon what shows we bring into our state.
So if I heard you correctly, you're saying that a show could be, they could be spending $500,000 to $10 million or $5 million within a local community?
Very much so. We did Matilda, I believe, in the middle of 2010s. I wasn't, of course, here yet, but they spent 8 weeks at our theater. And that is not a small show. And that was probably one of the bigger techs that we have probably ever done at the Schubert. And so I can only imagine that with 8 weeks, probably a cast or a cast of about 40 people and a company thereafter of technical folks as well, easily in the 70 people range. Now you're saying, say, $150 a night, 70 people, $150 a night times 7 nights times 8 weeks. That's just the hotel. The per diem aspect, as I mentioned before, $1,000-ish a person, 70 people, 70,000 times 8. You're talking about hundreds/millions of dollars being spent. And once again, on the small tour of last year, their set was about $1 million for a somewhat smaller set. On a Matilda or one of these massive shows like a Les Mis, those sets could easily be $1 million+. And that's things are not being built here yet, but we have the capability already here, just waiting for the opportunity. And so the range can definitely vary, but I do know that we have already the infrastructure here to support that range of quality productions that want to come here, but that are just waiting for us to help them out a little bit.
So the report that you'll be submitting, or the data that you'll be submitting, will that show the economic impact that you're describing here?
It does. It kind of breaks it down. And I will say that one of the other people who will be testifying today is this data that they provided to me. I have removed some of the aspects that identifies which show is which, but the data is all real. And once again, one of the folks who's testifying later today is the one who provided it to me, because they are a CEO of a touring company that creates the tours that we present. And so 2 different companies that are actually presenting today can speak to this information probably even better than I can, because they are the ones that are literally putting the confirmations on where they will go and where they will spend their money. And in turn, how these tax credits maybe in other states have benefited them and allowed them to make that decision to go to these different states than besides us.
I do have, I'll hold one of these questions for the next testimony regarding the consultant, I would imagine, will be testifying. But the last question I have is regarding the tax credits and the selling of them. How many of these entities on average sell the tax credit rather than use them, or probably use some and then sell the remaining?
You know, this is a particular area that I am not as well versed in, because this goes into a world that as a theater, we wouldn't be a part of that equation. I do know that I believe the Rhode Island bill, they're able to sell the tax credits. And once again, they will be able to speak a little bit more to their thought process when it comes to either selling them and or using them. And some of the data that they provided to me does show that equation on there. And I don't know if I should just say who's speaking later, that you can ask these very particular questions to, but it would be Angela of Troika and or Seth of Networks, and they're on the list to speak today as well. And they are the ones that really probably dive into that aspect, because they're the ones that are benefiting from the actual tax credit themselves as the entity that's creating the show.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Thank you, Madam
Thank
Chair.
you.
Thank you, Senator. Seeing no further questions, thank you again for what you do, as others have noted, and for being with us this morning.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for what you do as well.
Next up, we have Representative Trenae McGee.
Good morning, esteemed colleagues. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of HB 6919, an act establishing a tax credit for certain pre-Broadway and post-Broadway theater productions. The power of theater transcends from generation to generation. It has become one of the most powerful and influential art forms across the world. In the theater, you are brought into a new space each time with different characters, stage elements, props, set and costume designs, and most importantly, community. You are invited to feel. The power of theater in Connecticut is endless. We have become the launching pad for some of the most prolific artists in American history. Meryl Streep trained here. August Wilson wrote and premiered here. Mark Twain lived here, Lupita Nyong'o starred here, Al Pacino on stage here, and Angela Bassett started an acting troupe here. Although Connecticut is next to the city that never sleeps, we are made up of cities that have awakened the true artists and many legends. How can we continue to commit to providing these spaces for artists that are on the rise today? We can ensure that we are creating spaces that physically support the arts by providing tax credits to artists who decide to share their art form with us over the competitive markets around us. In 1995, New York began tax incentives and credits for both Broadway and off-Broadway productions. Rhode Island, Maryland followed. In this session, Massachusetts governor has incorporated theater tax credits within the budget. This means that producers will be able to decide where they want to show their work, making it a much greater challenge for us to be the launching pad of artistry that we have historically been since the inception of both recreational and professional theater. We house the Bushnell, Waterbury Palace, Stanford Palace, the Schubert Theater, and Guard Arts, among several others. These theaters really need tax credits to continue to thrive in today's climate. Now let's talk money. Theatrical productions literally bring in millions of dollars in cities where their shows are produced. This enhances the economic development of local businesses. A show's operational cost in the theater accrues much financial income. Like Six the Musical that I got to see that was presented at the Schubert Theater in New Haven, Connecticut. It had a settlement total of $362,650.05. This is just an example of the capital generated from each production. $300,000 of production expenses went to the hotel that the cast and crew stayed at while locally spending time right here in Connecticut. Six Tour number 2 generated a settlement total production cost of $325,000.
30 seconds.
$148,000, and A Soldier's Place spent $49,000 on a hotel right here. This is a prime example of how theater is not a dying art form. However, when producers land a solid market in a space that values their work, the audiences come to the theater and businesses reap the benefits. I need to find a home, a place for artists to stay for the next few months, hire business, provide catering services, crew, and contact the local press shop to print programs, rent transportation for all travel, and provide excursion opportunities for creatives to shop locally.
You've reached 3 minutes. Please summarize.
The International Alliance of Theater Stage Employees Local number 74 of Southern Connecticut is made up of 240 electricians, carpenters, and sound personal makeup and wardrobe residents right here in Connecticut. So I ask that you please support HB 6919. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Quick question. I wonder whether
Sure.
you could help us clarify. There's, I think, a little bit of, the distinction. Some of these productions, tech productions, there's no audience. They're
Mhm.
working it out. Whereas I wonder whether you could sort of distinguish for us the various kinds of productions we're talking about, and whether it's just, that we're talking about the cast and the crew, or we're talking about, because people have also mentioned, bringing audiences in and what the theater brings to the community. But I think
Right.
that's somewhat distinct from a lot of what we're doing here.
Right. So one of the things that I had the opportunity of doing is when I attended Cooperative Arts in New Haven as a high school student who studied theater, we got to see the shows teched. So they brought in audiences. We didn't have to pay, obviously, a ticket price. There was a relationship that they worked out with us, as well as local artists in the community. And we got to see the shows tech. So we knew we were going to a show that they may stop because of the lights, or someone's costume needs to be fixed, or someone's, hair needs to be clipped. And so we did see that process. We saw what that looked like. But what people don't realize is when you go to New York and you go to Broadway, you workshop a show that can be from a month to 6-7 months. And now artistry is changing so much, and we have a platform like social media where content creators are finding ways to sort of get their art forms out there in ways that they're able to afford. And so now people want to make their art to be accessible in other states and other locations. I love New York City, but a lot of artists would rather come to like a New Haven, Connecticut, or come to a Hartford, Connecticut, where the crowd is much different, where it's more communal, where you can incorporate high school students. Like I was a high school student who interned at the Schubert Theater as my first internship. Or you can bring your cast to a high school and do a masterclass workshop like I did. So artists and producers are actually looking for that. And unlike the film market, and I love film too, I actually got my start in acting doing commercials as a child. So I love film as well. But with the theater, with theater producers, instead of just looking for maybe like a cheaper location to film your work and to bring in mass production or crew from other states. Your goal is to find a theater that obviously houses and fits your show, but also to work with the stagehands who might live down the street or the catering service across the street. So those are the like communal elements. And then with a show that may be workshopped, the pre-Broadway part of it is everyone's show ultimately can be pre-Broadway. If you produce a show and it generates conversation, kind of like Lin-Manuel's Hamilton, before it even got to Broadway, he had done tons of work around it in other locations in like Alphabet City, New York, or in other locations before it even reached Broadway. And when you have the opportunity to do that, you sort of expand your base and you build community around your production before you even have the chance to get to Broadway. And so that's what a lot of theater producers are looking for today.
Thank you. Any Representative Farrar?
Thank you to our chairwoman. Hi, Representative. So nice to see you.
You
Thanks for
too.
being here and
course.
for sharing your passion so vividly with us. It's very helpful. I did have a question.
Mhm.
I know you mentioned that New York's kind of credit that they may have put in place was instituted in 1995.
Mhm.
And, you know, I think one of my interests kind of with this credit is kind of getting a greater sense of how kind of the investment, the way that this bill is written, it could be up to $10 million
Mhm.
would actually pay off for our state. And I've certainly heard a number of figures from the individual before you and yourself, but do you know if New York has pursued any type of analysis of their tax credit and some of the benefits of it?
Yes. So I think New Haven's tax credit cap is like 200. It was $100 million. And then post-pandemic, they were trying to work with artists to get them back into to the theater. So I think it became actually $200 million. But through New York's analysis, they actually discovered that the need between a straight play, which is a play without music, and a musical is much different. So they begin to offer different incentives for different productions. I think it was like, it's like 20% tax incentive for a straight play and then 45% for a musical, because musicals require just like a bunch of different elements. And so through their recent analysis, they discovered like not only do we have to get artists in theaters, but a lot of young artists, this is kind of actually to Senator Funfair's question earlier, a lot of young artists are becoming producers. And so they are staying in these locations that they want to produce and create their work because they want to create what they think will get young people to the theater. And so and with New York's recent analysis, one was they realized in order to actually get young artists into the theater, they had to launch all sorts of diversity programs. And so they launched a program actually this past Broadway session where they brought in artists who would have never had the opportunity to perform and bring their shows to Broadway. And some stayed on Broadway for a long time, and then some kind of just had the experience of being on Broadway. I recently just saw August Wilson's The Piano Lesson with Samuel Jackson. It was phenomenal. And at the same time, while that was playing, there were other shows on Broadway from artists who it was their first play right across the street from like August Wilson. And so what they discovered is in order for their market to be reachable and accessible, they have to give sort of the incentive to whatever production, is beneficial to that. Obviously, we are a smaller market than New York, but I think that's actually what makes us valuable. Is that we're a smaller market, which means it's more intimate. You have more attention. You might have legislators in your show. Like I know when I saw 6, Rep. Curry was also there as well. So shout him out. And so a lot of producers are sort of looking for a space where there is actually less of a cap, which to me shows their reliability. And then they can generate sort of like a buzz around their show from the community.
Thank you for that additional detail. And like I said, I'll definitely be looking further into kind of how New York has quantified the benefits of this. So thank you.
You're
Thanks for
welcome.
being here.
You're welcome. Of course, I can send you information as well.
That would be great. Thanks.
Thank you, Representative Farrar. And stumbling over I need another cup of coffee this morning, apparently. Representative Carney.
Thank you very much. Hi, Rep. McGee.
Hello.
I don't have any questions for you. I just want to thank you for taking the lead on this. I know you have a passion for theater. Annie
you.
actually premiered in Connecticut. I think it was at the Goodspeed. So, and that obviously is one of the most famous shows of all time. So I really, though, I mean, theater brings in so much economic activity. I've seen it in Old Saybrook with the Kate. People go out to dinner, they go to bars, and they spend a lot of money going to these shows. And we actually, as you said, we're the perfect location, perfect time for this. So I really just wanted to say thank you for taking the lead on this and really making people aware how important theater is to our local economy. So thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. And again, thank you for your
course.
leadership on this and for your obvious passion for the issue.
Of course.
So thanks
Thank
for being
you.
with us.
Have a good day, everyone.
You too. Next up, we have Representative Nolan, who I believe was in, there we go. There he is. Sit down. Good morning, Representative.
Good morning, members of the Finance, Revenue and Bonding Committee, Chairwoman Maria Horn, Senator John Fafara, ranking members, representatives, Cheeseman, Ferrara, Berry, Martin, Senator, Rep. Carney, Rep. Bronco, and Rep. Patella. Good morning to you all. I'd like to recognize you. You know me, Anthony Nolan. I represent New London's 39th district. Thank you for holding this public hearing and for the opportunity to submit testimony supporting House Bill 6919, an act establishing a tax credit for certain pre-Broadway and post-Broadway theater productions. A lot of what I would have tried to say, Representative McGee just came before you with her big educational knowledge in regards to theaters, but our theaters not only create enriching environments within our state, but they bring a lot of revenue. Rep. Carney, you talked about the economic side of it, but it's a great tourism aspect to our state also. Government research suggests that the nonprofit arts and culture centers are significant industry in the state of Connecticut, which generates around $653 million I read about in total economic activity. Theaters benefit area businesses by providing new customers, tourists, and overall stimulation to the local economy. They're an important attraction in our cities and state. As a New London resident and leader, I also speak on behalf of the Gard Arts Center. Their mission strives to engage, enrich, entertain, educate, and inspire New London residents and theater goers. That theater, it is heavily involved with our youth. We hold a talent show production there for the last 10 years, and it brings kids from all areas together to build relationships, to see how the theater works. And it not only runs into them doing things with the theater and on stage and behind stage, but as was said earlier, it also is something that our local restaurants get involved with, and some of our kids get to go and work in some of these areas to try and give them an experience that from the amount of people that the theaters bring. By supporting and passing House Bill 6919, it will help all theaters to be able to connect with Connecticut citizens and bring the community together for creative enrichment. By passing this bill, we are funding our theaters to unite communities and give life to our state. Theaters provide everyone with an opportunity to express themselves on a, excuse me, on a judge-free stage, and are considered a haven for many of our Connecticut residents. Theaters give diverse community power to showcase their culture. Let us join these voices and be part of bringing in creativity for our state. And I just wanted to explain that and hope that you'll give support to this. And if there's any questions, I can answer them, but I think the Wiz already took care of that for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Rep. Nolan. Always nice to have you in front of us. Seeing no questions, again, thanks for sharing your voice.
You guys have a wonderful day. Thanks.
Same to you. Next up, we have Andrew Ginsburg. Welcome, sir.
Good morning, Senator Fonfara, Representative Horn, and the rest of the committee. That was a tough act to follow, a lot of pun intended. As a beer distributor in the state of Connecticut, we too have a vested interest and want to see ages 21 to 31 in this community. So thank you for that. But the main reason I'm here is in support of SB 1236. First and foremost, I'd like to thank the committee for its consideration of this bill as is written today. Since the inception of the bottle bill, Hartford Distributors and its peers have led the way in a working and productive system to process aluminum and glass that we sell into the marketplace. Now, while the current system is not broken, costs have risen significantly along the way in terms of labor and updates to the bottle law. Just last year, in the modernization of the bottle bill, the handling fee that we pay out has risen 66% alone. The increase in the deposit from 5 to 10 cents has created the ideal arbitrage opportunity. Customers will, in fact, hold on and hoard their empties, as we've heard today in our community, in our social circles, in business. They will buy them at 5 cents and return them at 10 cents, leaving us to manage the 5-cent differential. Last year, Hartford Distributors alone processed about 65 million units alone. And that's just one part of the state. So as a cooperative, you can imagine how high that bill will be. Furthermore, you no longer have to be Kramer or Newman from Seinfeld to figure out the economics behind this arbitrage opportunity. We're a small state surrounded by one state in particular, Rhode Island, who has no deposit, and 2 others who have nickel deposits currently. The second part of the bill is the escalation in the sheets money that we are allowed to keep. And again, this is much appreciated to go against those rising costs going
30
forward into the future. So again, I thank you for your time this morning and your consideration for this bill, and I'm open to any questions.
Thank you. I'll start with a quick one. We had some testimony earlier about confirming the need to address a particularly urgent and somewhat temporary, we hope, situation that you and others are facing. But as we look at this in the future, I will say that, this comes out of the bottle bill, the goal of which is to get more containers redeemed. And from your perspective, how do we know that this particular moment has passed, or whether this is a sustained problem? So obviously the arbitrage with Rhode Island, that's not a new problem. That's been in existence for a while.
Correct.
So what are you watching in terms of metrics of this program?
We are watching, obviously, our costs. We understand that the rise in deposit is a snapshot in time, and we appreciate the 6-month reserve to help alleviate that. Going forward, we want to ensure that our process continues to be a reliable one, which it has been over the years. We do a very good job of picking up and processing all of the products that we contribute into our communities. I think there's a bigger trash problem that needs to be dealt with, but as far as the recyclables, that's what I can talk to. And I think we have a system in place that deals with that nicely.
Thank you. Any other Senator Fonfara?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Andrew.
Good morning.
Can you tell the committee what you see and maybe your industry sees in Connecticut as potential exposure from the arbitrage? our exposure is a lot to do with obviously our business and our bottom line. But it's also the shift and from empties coming over state lines, that from consumers who have not paid deposit in Connecticut, have not paid sales tax in Connecticut, and now we are left to process their empties as a result of that. We see the migration of empty bottles as a huge issue going forward. But with respect to Connecticut residents, as you indicated earlier, regarding those that know about that they paid 5 cents and now can redeem at 10 cents, what do you envision that being the impact if we didn't have this proposed solution? Us alone, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars, and definitely more as a whole in our industry. 5 cents per unit adds up when you're talking about millions of units coming back. You're talking about a barrage on the system. The people picking up our empties are backed up. Meanwhile, those empties are backing up in our warehouse, which can also cause an unsafe environment for our workers. These empties are building up in people's garages, in stores, creating possible health issues. And I assume you're factoring in that the intent of the increase from 5 cents to 10 cents is that people right now that may be throwing away their bottles would now feel the incentive to redeem. I strongly believe that, yes. But I'm saying I'm assuming you're factoring in the potential exposure you have, that not only for those that know the difference between 5 cents and 10 cents, but also those that recognize that, hey, I haven't been participating in redemption up to this point. I'm going to start doing that. Not even necessarily thinking about the advantage that they gain from the return. Correct. We believe that it'll come out as single stream into, and they will start to redeem into our system. Great. Thanks very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Rocky Gallo.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone from Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee. I appreciate the opportunity to come up and speak to you this morning. On behalf of the Connecticut Beer Wholesalers Association, my name is Rocky Gallo, and I'm the Vice President of A. Gallo and Company in Litchfield.
Rocky, could you please push the button in front of you to turn your mic on so we can hear you clearly?
Wrong button, sorry. Got it. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony supporting SB 1236. The Connecticut Beer Wholesalers Association represents the interests of 6 family-owned Connecticut businesses responsible for distributing beer in our state. By way of background, in 2021, the Connecticut General Assembly passed Public Act 2158, which, as you're aware, increases our deposits from 5 cents to 10 cents as of January 1st. Distributors are going to be exposed to a substantial financial burden due to this transition. We believe Senate Bill 1236 offers a solution to that. Under the provisions in lines 105 through 111, distributors will be allowed to delay the payments of the unreturned containers to the Department of Revenue Services for the final 2 quarters of the year. Since 2009, distributors hold bank accounts to deposit the refund value for all of the containers that we sell. Then when customers return those bottles or cans, we refund those deposits from those accounts. And then at the end of each quarter, we then pay the Department of Revenue Services the refund value on all the containers that were not returned during that period, minus the small portion that we're allowed to keep. By allowing us to delay these payments, SB 1236 will enable us to accumulate sufficient reserves to pay for the transition that's going to occur from 5 to 10 cents. As we've noted earlier, we're going to see a dramatic increase in returns due to stockpiling by consumers, retailers, and redemption centers. And we're also going to see an increase in border redemptions from New York, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. So as we mentioned before, when we sell a container here in December, we're going to be collecting the 5 cent and we'll be paying out 10 cents when we get it back in January. So we'll be left holding the bag on that 5 cents. The Connecticut Beer Wholesalers Association asks you to support SB 1236, allowing distributors to delay the payments to the Department of Revenue Services for the quarters ending September 30th and December 31st in preparation for paying out the 10-cent refund value beginning on January 1st. Distributors will then resume their payments to the Department of Revenue Services as of March 31st.
30 seconds.
And any accumulation of funds that remains in the account at that time would be paid back to the Department of Revenue Services as a true-up, minus the portion that we're allowed to keep.
Thank you, Mr. Gallo. Any questions? Seeing none. Thank you. Michael Sala.
Good morning. Morning, co-chairs from Fire and Horn, ranking members Martin and Cheeseman, and distinguished members of the Finance Committee. My name is Mike Sala. I'm Vice President of Global Tax and Real Estate for United Rentals. United opened for business in Connecticut in 1997, and today we're the world's largest rental company with over 1,500 locations across North America, Europe, Australia, New Zealand, and close to 25,000 employees. Connecticut's home to our headquarters, our data center, 9 rental locations in Beacon Falls, Bloomfield, Bridgeport, Danbury, New Haven, North Stonington, South Windsor, Stamford, and Wallingford. And we have 300 employees in the state. I'm here today testifying in strong support of HB 6922 with some proposed amendments. A fundamental principle of income taxation is that if gains are taxable, losses should be deductible. It's a policy principle recognized by U.S. and international policymakers, and it's reflected in current federal law and in the clear majority of U.S. states. To be clear, this means that to the extent a taxpayer generates a loss in one year, that loss should be deductible by the taxpayer in another year. In 2015, Connecticut departed from that policy, and in doing so, departed from the policy of neighboring states and federal law. Specifically, in 2015, Connecticut law was enacted that limits the deductibility of prior year losses to only 50% of current year income. And after 20 years, those losses become non-deductible or expire. This means that after the 2015 law change, a business would need roughly twice as many years to be able to fully deducted losses it had previously realized. However, the 2015 law didn't also increase the number of years available to deduct those losses. It only shrunk the amount that could be deducted in any particular year. The policy makes Connecticut an outlier. Neighboring states, New York and Massachusetts, impose no limitation annually on the amount of loss that can be deducted. HB 6922 offers a chance to bring Connecticut policy in line with federal policy and that of surrounding states, as well as the majority of the rest of U.S. states. While
30 seconds.
I'm testifying in support of 6922, its current form does nothing to address this problem. 6922 should simply extend the time period to utilize net operating losses already incurred. The needed change is to simply add 10 years onto the existing time period for companies to deduct prior year losses that occurred after 2000. I urge your support in voting favorably for this bill with the proposed amendments.
Thank you, Mr. Sala. Could you share with the committee what are the reasons for your company incurring losses?
So there are various, but I think the primary reasons were the company was really in its infancy prior to 2000. And recall the 2015 bill becomes effective in 2000. United Rentals was formed in 97. And so those were early years from us. We certainly kicked off some losses during that period. I think, the thrust of your question, I think that's most meaningful is to the extent folks are starting businesses in Connecticut and did prior to 2015 and after 2000 and realized losses. This legislating is hurting their ability to recover and become a profitable contributing business.
And those losses that is offset by gains that you're making now, correct?
That's right. That's right. And this is sort of a formula, I think, for modern business. We invest up front, realize losses, recoup those later, both before and after tax. Again, it goes to that principle, what's referred to as a principle of symmetry in the income tax law. It applies internationally as well as domestically. And it's sort of an accepted principle.
And to what extent do you think the change in 2015 is impacting our environment for businesses to want to start here and knowing that they're going to, as many do, incur losses in their initial years of operation?
Well, it must certainly factor in when folks are selecting a location for the business. And, there are other aspects to that, of course, labor costs, sort of quality of life, standard of living issues. But this is so fundamental to those early years that a business operates. So I'm quite certain it's factoring in.
Thank you. Questions? Representative Barry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Sala, for being here and testifying in support of this bill. This is something that I strongly support as well. You had mentioned that Connecticut is an outlier from neighboring states and from federal policy. Can you just expand on that a little bit?
Sure. So federally, what the federal government did in 2017 was decrease the annual limit, similar to Connecticut, the annual limit to 80%. Only 80% of any year's taxable income could be offset by an old loss. Connecticut took a little bit harsher position, applying a limit of 50%. That's where the federal government and the states depart, and particularly federal and Connecticut law depart. The federal government removed entirely the limit on your ability to carry forward that loss. And so while shrinking the amount that could be used in any given year, the federal government recognized it would be unfair to shrink that annual capacity without extending the period to fully use everything. Connecticut law didn't do that. That's where sort of things break down. The 15 law imposes a really onerous limit of 50%, really among the lowest, really the second lowest in the United States, but did nothing to extend the period to use those losses. So that's really where the disconnect comes in. Should say across all other states that have an income tax, every other state adopts a version of the policy we recommend today, and have either unlimited income offset with prior year losses, an unlimited carry forward period, or both. We really have neither.
Excellent. Thank you.
Senator Martin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If we went back to the federal guidelines, would that be better than what we're proposing here in this legislation?
It actually is. What we're proposing is quite a bit less generous than current federal law, which provides for the losses in question, those which occur after 2017, that they can be carried forward really forever. We refer to that as evergreen. Prior to that law change, federal law provides a 20-year carry forward limit, but doesn't cap the annual usage of prior year losses. And so unfortunately, in Connecticut, we have a cap of 20 and a 50% limit. And so, yes, certainly federal law would be more generous, and we're stopping short of that. but nevertheless would be an improvement.
And if we did do that, how would we fare compared to our bordering states?
I think better. I think I couldn't say sort of off the cuff how well we compare sort of in all 50. I think that it would certainly take us out of this outlier scenario we're in, where only Pennsylvania imposes a more aggressive limit of net operating loss policy. I should say too, Pennsylvania has a ton of litigation on that, the constitutionality of that. It's moving its way through the courts, so certainly not a model.
Yeah. And lastly, I know this piece of legislation addresses a 30-year period starting effective 2024. And it sort of changes, I guess, what the intent of the ask was for to start it, I guess, immediately rather than if you're in the 20-year cycle now, that you'd be allowed to continue up to 30 years. And this piece of legislation really doesn't do that, but it starts a new 30 years effective 2024.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. The legislation as drafted would only be effective prospectively. When you have a whole host of taxpayers beginning in 2000 and made it through that 2008 recession, indeed were impacted by COVID, generated losses in the past 15, 20 years, who would not be helped by the bill as drafted. And so I think the amendments are critical.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Cheeseman.
Thank you. Thank you very much for coming today. And you, obviously you're advocating on the behalf of United Rentals. Do you have any idea how many companies would be affected by this change?
I'm not sure. I think the way to describe that would be to say it's any business that generated a loss between 2000 and 2015 and hasn't yet recovered that loss fully. And you could see, myriad fact patterns where that might have occurred. Someone who struggled with the 2008 crisis, exposed to real estate, which has fluctuated, Connecticut, depending on where you were investing. So it could be a whole host of taxpayers. I think that, it's really DRS that would have to investigate.
Well, it'd be interesting to get that data. And obviously you feel that the backdating component as opposed to making it prospective is a critical part of getting this legislation right.
It is critical. And I read into your question, a question about potential fiscal impact. And I think that what the legislation currently does is holds the line on the 50% limitation annually. It only provides for an additional 10 years to work through losses. Given that 50% limitation still applies as it has during the past 15, 20 years, and as we propose prospectively, we don't see a path conceivably where there would be a significant revenue impact.
Okay, so basically you're just stretching it out over a longer period of time, but it's the same amount of loss.
That's right.
All right.
That's right.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you, sir. Tim, Representative Acker.
Good morning. Senator Pomfara, Senator Martin, Representative Horn, Representative Cheeseman, Senator Miller, Representative Farrar, and other members of the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee. My name is Tim Ackert. I represent the 8th District, which includes Bolton, Columbia, Coventry, Lebanon, and Tolland. Thank you for the opportunity to submit testimony in the following bill on today's public hearing agenda. House Bill 6921, an act concerning the amount of the apprenticeship tax credit for the construction trades. I want to start by thanking the committee for raising this legislation. The need for apprentices is growing as we have an aging workforce in our construction industry. I believe this legislation is a strong indicator of the commitment this legislature has for getting individuals in these desirable jobs. Raising the tax credit to $7,500 a year for a hired apprentice proves this commitment. I've been in the construction business for 42 years, including the service in the United States Air Force. I've been a Connecticut apprenticeship sponsor for most of those years. Connecticut has a strong apprenticeship program. I believe this will provide an opportunity to strengthen it and encourage our businesses to hire more apprentices. An additional step needed, though, is for the legislature to remove the barriers for hiring by adjusting the hiring restrictions for these licensed trades. Thank you for the opportunity today to share my thoughts on Raise Bill 6921 and for your consideration of my remarks. I'd be open to any questions, but I do want to say it's got to be great to look at a public hearing agenda that always says, and it all says supports after every piece of legislation. I want to be back on this committee.
If only we could do all those things that everybody wants to do. Sadly, math. Thank you, Representative Ackert, for being here and bringing your substantial experience on this issue. I have a question about sort of, as I am looking at tax credits broadly and trying to understand, which ones we do for public policy reasons, which ones, or which public policy reasons, and how you identify the data that establishes that these have been successful. So with that respect, what data is available to us as a state in terms of evaluating the success of apprenticeship programs, particularly in the construction trades?
Well, that's a great. So we have the department, in the Department of Labor, we have the apprenticeship portion, which deals with just this component. And we can look at, is there a growth in apprenticeships coming into the trades? Right now, there is a growth. It's not strong enough, though. And honestly, it's not. For the work that we're going to need for our infrastructure in the state of Connecticut, for the housing market, if you look at the housing committee this year and how many incentives they have for affordable housing, I believe January, we had a number of housing starts, the largest since 2008. So if you think about these numbers in the areas that we need to fill, most people in the trades look something like me right now, which is a little bit, I'm looking to hopefully get out someday. But we need the youth and a diverse youth. Right now, I know that some organizations like the Home Builders and Remodelers are getting into the inner cities and really looking at promoting it in the inner cities to get folks that want to get into trades and have that diverse trades and growing the women. I actually have women in my business that work as an apprentice electrician. And I think that's an area that we need to really continue to support and push and encourage. So the building trades can tell you right now that the carpenters, roofers, solar installers are limited. We don't have enough of them. And I think that what we need to do is figure out a way to get them into the trades and, encourage them through a tax credit. Yes, I get it. But then you got to see, right, the investment, right? The, what do we call it? The incentive that we do, is it working? Right? Is it what we're doing working? And I think that's the key that we have to, to continue to look at. So return on our investments. Is it working? Are we growing the trades? That's what you struggle. That's what you have to take into consideration. And I think that this is an area that we need to grow. I know the governor's and his workforce council is really pushing that this area in all aspects of Connecticut. So.
Well, yeah, you've put your finger on it. Is it working? So I've, and you've talked a little bit about, the need to grow, to bring people into these trades. What about the other end of it? If somebody's being brought in as an apprentice, how many of them are moving on to becoming full-fledged, journeyman? Thank you.
Yep. I think we have a success in that area. I think what we got to look at is, we had a discussion in another committee about that, where that status, that statistics, I have that statistics, and that the apprenticeship department has that statistic. How many started into there and how many completed and over what time frame? They may not have completed with an individual sponsor. That's something that when I look at the apprenticeship programs, whether it's HVAC, carpentry, plumbing, electrical, whatever it may be, you may start it with one group and move on to another one. It's kind of like I always look at when I was a trustee for the community colleges, and I was looking at how do we know if that person completed that, that got their degree. Well, sometimes they went on to a different college. It's the same thing with the trades. You may have started with, ABC HVAC contracting, and you went on to, Joe's HVAC contracting. But did they complete? Did they get that license, that degree, sort of say, from the trades? And that's the area that the Department of Labor has statistics on.
Great. So I wonder if, as we look at and try to define what success here looks like and making sure we're paying attention to the full through line, in other words, bringing people in, also make sure they're moving on to become, fully paid and compensated for their work, and skilled to do the work. As you say, we need to bring them into the workforce. I personally, and I'm going to be looking at to make sure that we have the data to continue to assess whether this is successful. So are you still a supporter of this in the event, in exchange for this additional tax credit, the state makes certain requirements that certain data be reported to make sure that we do have information about that program?
Great question. We have a bill that does that in the Labor Committee. That we just moved out of the Labor Committee. It's not perfect, but it's an area that we can improve on. The legislation itself that would do just that, that would look at, that. But also I want to keep in mind, for an individual to go in and get training to be a plumber, to get training to do carpentry, and also along that way, make $40,000 to $50,000 a year. I've been more impressed that person got into a trade, got some money, moved on. Maybe they did that as a break between college from going to getting their bachelor's to their master's. Maybe they did it for different reasons. So sometimes you got to look at the individual. What are they doing? But in the meantime, we've got somebody in the trades becoming a value to the workforce, but also making a very healthy wage and learning something. So look at it a couple of different ways.
Yeah, to your point, this is, to me, is about making sure we have the data to make that assessment rather than prejudging what that data means. So thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Cheeseman.
Thank you. And no real question for you, Representative Ackert, but just a comment again. Thank you for your advocacy today. And thank you for your continued advocacy on the question of apprentice ratios and licensure and all those things that I think are obstacles to providing full employment. So I want to thank you.
Thank you, Representative.
Representative Clarissa Tetria.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative, for being here today. My question, so this is going from $4,000 to $7,500. What's the reason to go from $4,000 to $7,500?
Well, I think there are probably a couple of reasons. The labor wages are increasing, so if you look at the data, so way the Department of Labor looks at it, and I agree with good wages for employees. Apprenticeships are kind of a training, so it's earn while you learn. The way the Department of Labor looks at how you set a wage for an apprentice is 50% when they start out of a journey person's wage. So let's say the journey person is making, in the Labor Department says that the initial wage for a journey person is $22 an hour. That's the person that just got their license, that's still a little green, that has some learning still to do, but can work competently on their own. So half of that is how much? $11. But our minimum wage goes up, as you know, so the training wage is increased. So it's closer to that journey person's wage than the 50%. And the way that the apprenticeship program, which is fantastic, and I've said this, that I think we have a great program here, is that every 6 months you're mandated to get a 5% raise. Mandated, everybody gets a 5% raise if you complete that 6 months of work in that trade. So the offset is kind of okay, we know you're training them. You have a lot of hours that your journey people are working with you. So the offset is we want you to get apprentices in here. So, and we know you're paying them more than you used to pay them because of the minimum wage going up, which is fine. But here's that offset. Here's that encouragement, because can you, for a few dollars more, get a licensed person? If you could find a licensed person, you could. But that's kind of this offset, and that's where the benefit to the company would be.
Okay, thank you for the explanation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah. Thank you. Senator Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Ackert. That $7,500, is that equivalent to raising the $11 an hour to a minimum wage level?
Well, I think in the licensed trades, that would be helpful, right? In terms of getting that person, because the investment for a company is a strong event, whether you're a union shop or an open merit shop, you invest a lot of time, effort in training. So that would be the offset to, having higher starting wages right out the gate. So I remember my last apprentice that I hired, prior to the state said, okay, your base wages should be $22 because they help you. You don't have to pay them that. You can pay them more, but the goal is that they say you should be setting your standard at, the state says, at least 22, but you can't hire a journey person for $22 an hour right now, first and foremost. So, but you should be paying them. So that dollars, the 7,500 would help offset the raise in the pay that you're now paying apprentices for a starting wage. For the initial years.
And regarding from what I understand, apprenticeship program to be with DOL is that it needs to be initiated by an employer. And how do they hear about the apprenticeship programs?
So, well, in the trades themselves, we know that there's a state apprenticeship program office in the state of Connecticut. So you become a sponsor. So right when you're going to hire your very first apprentice, and you have to register them right off the get before they start working for your company, you have to register them. So you have to first become a sponsor. So you contact the State Department of Labor and look at and say, I want to become a sponsor for plumbing, for HVAC. There's so many types of apprenticeships in the state of Connecticut now. Some aren't licensed trades, some are non-licensed trades. And then you become a sponsor, and then that sponsor is monitored. So you have to file every year you have to file your apprenticeship report, who's still your apprentice, how far they moved along, and how many people that how many journey persons that you have that work with them. So that's a file that we do on a regular basis. And so the state tracks that.
Well, just one last question. Thank you. You mentioned restrictions, there are obstacles. Can you elaborate a little bit more on what those are?
Yeah, I know that's not part of this legislation, but if we're going to encourage people to hire, which is exactly what this bill is going to do, it's going to encourage people to look at, bringing apprenticeships into their business. But there are licensed trades that have hiring restrictions. It's hiring ratios that we have in the state of Connecticut. And that's the biggest barrier to bringing more people into the workforce for HVAC, plumbing, electrical, pipe fitter, in those areas. So that's the area that we need to work stronger on. I've been working on it for many years. But that's an area that if we really want to grow the trades, if we really want to have the green jobs that are coming to Connecticut, have a strong in Connecticut workforce, union and open shop, then we need to look at the restrictions that we place on businesses. Other than the licensed trades in the state of Connecticut, there is no barrier for hiring. If I'm a chef and I need 20 wait staff, I can get 20 wait staff. If I'm a barber and I want to bring on barbers, apprenticeships, I can bring in as many as I want. If I'm a carpenter and I have a one lead tech, I can have 20 carpenters under me, 20 apprenticeship carpenters under me. But the licensed trades, it takes 3 licenses per one to hire one apprentice. So oversight's pretty strong. I actually met with the governor the other day and chatted about this, and he goes, well, it's 3 to 1, right? 3 apprentices to one licensed person. Yeah. And I said, actually, Governor, it's not like that. We have a 1-to-1 safety ratio on the job sites that we have now. And that's what you want. And that's what we should have in hiring.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I think when you hear 3 to 1, you always think it's a 3 apprentice to 1 journeyman. And it's the other way around. So
yeah, but in our job sites, we have 1-to-1. And I think that's what our hiring should be.
Yeah.
And that's what when you do good legislation like this, and you've done this in the past with the 4,000 to start off, this committee has done that. I think we incentivize that, but let's not have another barrier to stop us from growing our apprenticeship programs in the state of Connecticut.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. Representative Ackert, can you tell us, I see that to follow you are the Home Builders Association and the HVAC Association. Who else has an interest in this? What can we expect? What kind of interest and activity if we were to pass this legislation?
That's a great question, Senator. I think that we have brought in apprenticeships in the state of Connecticut. And the list of apprenticeship programs under Todd Birch in that department is enormous. What I think what happens in this building, we do good stuff, but we don't pat ourselves on the back and promote it. And I think that's an area that once we do this type of legislation that we have to be, we obviously with us, we can promote it through what we've done here, on our political, state rep and state senator sites and stuff like that. But the word doesn't get out strong enough to the people that are actually boots on the ground doing and hiring. And I think that when we do good work like this, we need to promote it. So whether it's a barber, whether it's, whatever else, carpenters, roofers, there's a whole apprenticeship list out there that could take advantage of this, that probably wouldn't think of themselves under this legislation, that could be part of that bubble that we need to make sure that it's understood. But if you go on the Department of Labor website and look at the apprenticeship list, it's a lot more than just the trades.
I've often questioned the need for an incentive like this for hiring, that if an employer needs a worker, they need the worker.
Right.
But you feel that that's not enough.
That's a great point, that I think what we look at is the balance of hiring already trained people as opposed to the effort that goes into bringing on a trainee. So if I could go out there and just, hire, a 20-year carpenter, but again, the workforce here in Connecticut is in the mid-50s and up for workers. How do we encourage a business to go out and actually look at and foster that in their community? Hey, I have jobs and I'm looking to train you, right? Actually promote that and look at training individuals, investing that time, talking to their lead techs on their jobs and say, listen, guys, I know you're used to working with well-trained carpenters, well-trained roofers, but I want to start building the trade. And I want to do that internally, and I want to go out there and reach and spend that time, because that is important. Our trades aren't a safe place to work, and you want to make sure that they're safe and they're well trained, and it comes from having experienced people train them, rather than just, if I'm going out and I'll see that, I'll see carpenters. They're looking for carpenters, trained carpenters. But let's look at and let's tell them, hey, we want you to put an extra effort to get more younger people and others maybe that are transitioning from a job that they don't like, that they were, in a business. I had a young lady come to me that said, I want to be an electrician. And she was a vested estimator for aerospace. And I said, I don't think I could pay you what you're getting paid. She goes, no, but I'm at the top. I can't go any further, but I know when I start in this trade, I'm going to surpass that in 4 years once I get my license. So I think that's the kind of people that we want to reach out to and encourage to get into the trades, and or a business that also has different, like I said, there's a lot of apprenticeship programs in the state of Connecticut that are outside just the building trades.
A couple other questions. You mentioned about the 1-to-1 for the licensed trades in the field.
Mm-hmm.
Why then do we have the 3-to-1? If it would seem to me logically that you'd want if there's going to be an imbalance like that, it'd be in the field where the actual work is being done. But why the requirement, and when does the 3-to-1 come into play?
So the way that the ratio works out is a small company that has 3 licenses can have 3 apprentices because it's a small company. Once you want to get that 4th apprentice, you have to hire 3 more journey people. And it goes exponentially like that. So I always look at a business that has 26 electricians can only have 10 apprentices. And so
what's the logic behind that? What's the
drive the costs up, to drive the labor costs up? To be quite honest, that's what it's for. It's to drive the labor costs up. And we've done that. Try to hire a plumber and electrician. It's the worst consumer thing you could have, because right now try to hire an electrician, a plumber, to do some work on your home, and look at the prices are at. And it's been unfortunate. This has been something I've been working on for a long time, Senator, and we want to listen, whether you're Katie Dykes and Deep and all the incentives that we have for the green technology that we want to do, heat pump systems, electric car chargers, electrical infrastructure. Connecticut does not have the workforce, and we've done it to ourselves by this hiring restriction. And it's trying to get it over the hurdle. The opposition, to be honest with you, is the union trades have been pushing back on changing this ratio. Now, the union carpenters have no license restriction because they don't have licenses. Union roofers have no roofers. Union iron workers have no ratios. It's just the plumbers, electricians, HVAC, pipe fitters. I think there's 5 of them overall that we have this hiring restriction of 3-to-1. And it is beside me when I look at what an apprentice can make in 4 years' time. They're making 60 to 70 grand a year in these trades plus, and that's without overtime. And you're 22, 23 years old. I had my apprentice, a young man, came out of one of our wonderful tech schools. So he only had to go about 3.5 years to get, because he already had his schooling done. He came up to me when he got his license. I want to thank you, Mr. Ackert. I could have $100,000 in debt. I almost have that in the bank account now because I worked for you for 4 years. Granted, he lived at home, didn't have a lot of expenses, but he put it in his bank rather than being in debt, because that's the value of our trades. Why are we limiting that? Is beyond me. And when you do incentives like you're doing here, at least having a conversation on this incentives, but we block the door for hiring people on the other end. It's a struggle to me to understand. And you tell that to the common person out there and they go, I don't understand why we're doing that.
Lastly, you mentioned in your testimony about inner city opportunities for inner city youth. I don't see that. I know we talk about it a lot here, but I don't see that translating into actually impacting inner city youth. I'd be much more interested in this provision if the individual associations that are going to be testifying after you and others were to present a plan on how, in fact, to manifest that expressed interest. And by the way, that's not solely the responsibility of the associations. Clearly, those of us that represent urban communities have a responsibility as well. But having that partnership would go a long way in having the stated interest be translated into actual results.
Yeah, that's the key, is results, right? Getting the young people interested. So actually the Council of Workforce Development has a program right now in our schools that they're working on right now that brings the individuals an opportunity. You're actually in the high schools now. That brings, not all of them, but you have to have the high school buy-in. That's the part you got to think about. We have to have the high school buy-in to having the programs. That's number one hurdle. Programs are out there. National Home Builders and Models Association has a program that actually goes into the schools and works with them. I've seen the program. I've been part of the discussion on it with students. So we have to get the opportunity when you hear about what's out there, and let's see how we grow that. Remember when we went to high school, couple decades, when I went to high school a couple decades ago or more.
Don't try to cut.
So we had home ec and we had industrial arts. We had the time. We've eliminating them from schools in the state of Connecticut because we mandate other courses that they have to take when these are some of the ones that we really should focus on. And these organizations, and I'm going to say, if these organizations want to be strong, yes, we should make them. I don't say make them legislatively, but say, listen, we want to see results from you. If you want to have stuff like this being done for you, show us what you're doing that will encourage those and provide that support. I think that that's something that they may not be happy with me saying it, but that they should take part in and be involved with. And the programs are out there. We just got to have the schools put them in. There are some schools that have done that in the state of Connecticut.
I appreciate your comment in that regard. Representative Yacarino has a question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good seeing you. Thank you, Representative Acker. Great seeing you. Yesterday in exec noms, and I apologize I'm not there, but I'll be back soon. We nominated, and it will be Senate resolution though for Senator Fonfara, Mr. Lance Hall. He's on the board of CTEC, and he's from Windsor. And we spoke yesterday at length about the trades and the electricians and plumbers and so on. What Mr. Acker, Representative Acker is trying to promote now to try to grow that, increase the tax credit. And in Connecticut, believe it or not, there's many, we're losing ground as far as our electricians and plumbers and so on. And I think this is vitally important. I think Tim mentioned we have an older population, and we need to entice and encourage as many people as possible. And I did ask Mr. Hall, Lance Hall, do you go into the schools, inner city? He's from Windsor, and they do go into schools, and they're trying to create a greater atmosphere, a greater conversation and appetite for our middle school students that eventually go to high school to get in these apprenticeships. So I really think, yes, you're giving a tax credit, but I think you're going to get a lot more in return. People making a good income, paying income taxes, saving money, but also helping, fix things for people, and create other jobs. So I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Tim, but I think the money, the tax credit you might get is going to give more incentive to hire more and for more people to be involved in the trades.
Thank you, Representative Yacarino. It's great to see you, sir.
You too. Anything you want to add on to that, or because there it is a dwindling.
I'm glad that focus is starting listen, it can start in the middle school and can go into, because one of the things that we have, like I mentioned, is we have a fantastic VOTEC high schools in the state of Connecticut, and I mean fantastic. But a lot of times the middle schoolers don't get the opportunity to even know and think about what they may do until they jump into that first year into that technical school. So if we had a little bit, maybe this should start in the middle schools and see about the young people that will then maybe take the move to our technical high schools because they're not really aware of them, what they provide, and maybe have a little bit of an opportunity to be these programs, these technical programs in middle school for at least, a class or two, just to see what's out there. I mean, I can guarantee you that there's a lot of tradespeople that would come in and speak to the students, kind of like a, business career day and talk to them. I've done that. But I think that's the opportunity that we should look at, maybe starting in a middle school, talking to some of these students that might not be on that, past 12 years of education, look to a tech school or a trade or a job, an apprenticeship at a different type of a job. So that's an opportunity I think we can work at an early day. So thank you for bringing that up about.
Yeah, I appreciate you putting this bill forth, and appreciate your time. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. I think you've exhausted the panel, Representative Acker.
It's great to see you, sir. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you. Jim Paris.
Good morning, Chairpersons Fonfara and Horn, Ranking Members Cheeseman and Martin, and distinguished members of the Finance and Revenue Bonding Committee. My name is Jim Paris, and I'm the CEO of the Home Builders and Remodelers Association of Connecticut. We represent roughly 800 businesses engaged in residential construction industry. Our members build between 70 to 80% of all new homes and apartments in Connecticut each year, and we engage in countless remodeling projects. I'd like to start by aligning my remarks with those of Representative Ackerts and thank him for his leadership in all things related to workforce development for skilled trades. The skilled trades really could not have better advocate. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony in support of House Bill 6921, which would increase the construction apprenticeship tax credit from $4,000 to $7,500 against wages paid over the first 4 years of a qualified apprenticeship. Last year, this body supported similar legislation that ultimately became law, which increased the manufacturer's tax credit. You did so because the business community conveyed an urgent need to train a skilled labor force to address the large volume of unfilled jobs in the manufacturing sector. I would argue that from a public policy perspective, the need to train the next generation of skilled trades engaged in residential construction is no less urgent or important. It is no secret that Connecticut finds itself in a housing affordability and accessibility crisis that is negatively impacting both the for sale and rental markets. We are simply not building enough housing to meet demand. In fact, based on US Census data, Connecticut has the second lowest rate of new home construction with 1.29 new builds per 1,000 people, beating out Rhode Island for last, who has 1.27 new builds per 1,000 people. There are several factors impacting Connecticut's lackluster housing production, not the least of which is the residential construction industry's shrinking workforce. Point in fact, Connecticut has one of the oldest residential construction workforces in the country, which slows production, increases costs, and exacerbates the growing housing accessibility and affordability crisis. While production has crept along at near recession levels for 14 years, the need for all types of housing to meet the diverse needs of Connecticut's residents has never been greater. According to US Census data, Connecticut towns authorized 5,244 residential construction permits in all of 2022. This includes both single and multifamily construction. To put that into perspective, Electric Boat intends to hire 5,750 new employees that will need housing in the southeast region of our state in 2023 alone. HB 6921 would be a significant incentive, particularly for small licensed trades businesses that might be on the fence, weighing the pros and cons of hiring and investing in a new apprentice. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony, and the HBRA of Connecticut strongly urges the Finance Committee to pass HB 6921 and ultimately incorporate it into the legislature's budget. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Paris. Representative Cheeseman.
Thank you very much for being here today. I know Senator Fonfara asked Representative Acker what the people like you who are asking for this particular tax credit are doing to promote employment in our cities with underserved, underrepresented populations. And there's a bill in education to do with workforce development. Can you address that and how that might confront and assuage some of the concerns that you're not fully engaging the populations that could really use this as a path forward?
Yeah, and first I'd like to say that Job Corps, both in New Haven and in the Hartford areas, includes and is partnered with the Home Builders Institute to provide pre-apprentice curriculum in the residential construction trades. And we at the HBRA have also partnered with both the DOL and HBI to get their pre-apprenticeship curriculum certified in the state of Connecticut, and that occurred with the help of folks like Representative Acker and other trades folks in 2022 last year. And so we've gotten the curriculum in place in one school, and that's in Stonington, Connecticut, and with 3 more coming online in 2023, including, I believe, Manchester, Suffield, and Mansfield. Certainly, our goal is to engage kids as soon as we can and the pre-apprenticeship program in the schools is a vital effort and component of our efforts. The bill that you're specifically alluding to, Representative, is Senate Bill 1197, I believe, and it's Section 6 of that bill, and that would actually incentivize schools to incorporate pre-apprenticeship programs and ensure their success by giving I believe it's up to $1,000 per student that successfully completes that pre-apprenticeship program and receives certification from the DOL and from HBI. Those kind of programs are really important, not only to in essence bring a shop back to the schools, but it's really important to that in that they actually have kids ready to either go on to the apprenticeship program that is certified by the state of Connecticut, or immediately into the trades, because the kids that actually complete those programs are issued an OSHA 10 card and will be given 3 hours towards a certified apprenticeship program. So it is significant and meaningful.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mhm.
Thank
Senator
you.
Martin, Senator Fanfare.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim.
Mhm.
Myra Drucker with Ellen Schuman, I think.
Hello.
Oh, here we go. There we go. I'm gonna kick off. Myra and I are members of the Investment Advisory Council. Senator Fanfare, Representative Horn, Senator Martin, Representative Cheeseman, and distinguished members of the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee. Myra and I both appreciate this chance to testify in support of Senate Bill 1235, an act implementing the Treasurer's recommendations concerning the Investment Advisory Council and related statutes. I'm Ellen Schuman. I serve as the chair of the Investment Advisory Council, which advises the Treasurer on the investment of our state's $45 billion in pension assets. And on behalf of the entire council, and together with Council Member Drucker, I enthusiastically endorse this legislation. Treasurer Russell, the council, and I have been working to create a best-in-class investment operation and a culture of excellence within the pension fund management team, or PFM, to generate superior risk-adjusted returns on behalf of our beneficiaries and, importantly, our taxpayers. And as the treasurer articulated earlier, our goal is better investment outcomes. In my almost 40 years as an investment professional, I've witnessed firsthand that investment success is highly correlated with the long tenure of talented investment professionals. Yet the state of Connecticut has had a poor record of retention, a dynamic that we hope to change with the help of Section 1 of this legislation, which gives the treasurer the authority to compensate the PFM team with oversight from the IAC. My written testimony includes a chart of the top 10 performing public plans over the past decade, which Representative Cheeseman, you cited in your earlier remarks. The performance along with the tenure of the chief investment officer, and that data is just stunning. Every state on the list has a long tenured chief investment officer, and we aspire to do the same. Now, the good news is the word is getting out that the culture of PFM is changing for the better. As one example, over 150 people have applied for the deputy chief investment officer position, for which we are currently recruiting. We've never seen this number of qualified applicants in recent history. The legislation before you will allow us to build on the momentum we have already established. In closing, I urge you to support Senate Bill 1235 and turn to my colleague, Myra Drucker, for her remarks.
Thanks, Ellen. I'd just like to pick up and underscore much of what Ellen has said. She's been an amazing chair for the Investment Advisory Council. My name is Myra Drucker, and I bring almost 50 years of investment experience to my role in advising the treasurer and the chief investment officer in their efforts to produce outstanding investment results for the taxpayers and pension beneficiaries of Connecticut. Many of those years were spent as a chief investment officer for multi-billion-dollar pension funds at Xerox International Paper and General Motors Trust Bank. And my years of experience have taught me that one key to creating excellent investment outcomes for a pension fund is to create the culture that Ellen spoke of that attracts and retains an excellent team to select the managers to invest the funds. That means establishing career paths that gives good people competitive compensation and visibility towards rewarding futures. Section 1 of SB 1235 helps the treasurer to do that by bringing the compensation of the entire investment team into his domain, subject to ranges approved by the IAC. I've also been actively engaged with not-for-profit organizations for almost 30 years, and all of those have been keenly concerned to maintain the highest ethical standards. This has been achieved through disclosure of any possible conflicts and recusal from any decisions where such conflicts existed. That is precisely the standard most state commissions use, and the one being proposed in SB 1235 for the Investment Advisory Council members, rather than the strict no business rule. The proposed approach would open a wealth of potential investment talent to the IAC while still maintaining the highest integrity in decision-making. Finally, the passage of SP 1235 is going to help ensure that the right decisions are being made by the right people about the right topics. And I urge you to pass this legislation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we're happy to answer any questions you might have.
Martin. Myra, if I recall, you came into my office last year to share your thoughts on this. Was this a bill that we had last year? Maybe you could speak to that a little bit.
Ellen,
actually, let me answer that, because you're right, Senator Martin, Treasurer Wooden and I met with you and Representative Cheeseman last year, and this is essentially the same bill as the prior year.
Okay. I think Senator Fanfaro would like to ask a few questions.
Thank you, Senator Martin. Apologize for the delay. For either one of you, I confess I am not recalling this bill. However, I'm told that we did vote it out. And obviously it met opposition somewhere beyond us. And if either of you recall the circumstances behind that, but when you share with the committee that we are an outlier in this regard with respect to being able to compensate folks, when I have to question whether we're able to, given your testimony, how effective, apparently, based on what you've said, the tenure, the long-term tenure of chief investment officers and how that pays dividends, we then logically, we haven't been achieving maximum returns if we're not compensating our chief investment officer adequately. Tell me where I'm off in that thinking.
Let me just start by sharing a little bit of background about what happened last year. I believe that this legislation came out of committee with a vote of 45-6. I don't believe it ever actually got to the floor for a vote, so it just died, I think. But there was overwhelming committee support for it. We have, as the treasurer mentioned in his testimony earlier, our compensation has been below the median. Now, compensation is one part of the picture. And as I mentioned in my remarks earlier, we want to create a culture of investment excellence. There's needs to be an esprit de corps among the team. We want people to have pride in what they do in serving the public good and serving our beneficiaries. So yes, we need to pay competitively, and we need to have these other qualitative aspects of collegiality and teamwork and pride. And I am seeing that over the last couple of years, developing this sense of camaraderie, this pride,
What was it like?
and investment excellence. And so it's a real package.
Ms. Schuman, what was it like before?
Well, we had I can't speak to that because I was the governor appointed me as the chair in May of 2020, and as you might remember, that was the inception of COVID. So I didn't get a chance to meet very many people for the first 18 months of my tenure, and but we have had a lot of turnover. We've had people poached from other plans. And we've had people go back to the private sector. I know that I have served as the chief investment officer at a nonprofit organization, a private foundation. We didn't pay top dollar, but we had incredible quality of our team, and we generated tremendous investment results. And I think the state can do the same.
I think if I can speak up here too, one of the things that this bill does is it enables the treasurer, as he said earlier today, I think a lot of strides have been made and had begun to be made under former Treasurer Woden to begin to more adequately compensate the more senior professionals within the investment organization. But what has happened is there's been a gap between the more junior people in the staff and the more senior people because the treasurer has not been able to create one unified career path because he does not have control over the entire organization from a compensation standpoint. So we've now, within the Investment Advisory Council, created a compensation and a talent and resources group to start to look at these issues and see if we can work to help the treasurer create and the chief investment officer create a sort of unified look at the team to create transparent investment paths. And this organization would then enable the treasurer to also have control over the compensation for the entire organization so that we don't have these gaps and we can start to make a really unified, coherent team out of the whole, which again, as a former chief investment officer, I can tell you makes a huge difference in the way people perceive the culture that they're working in.
This may be an unfair analogy, but it somewhat reminds me of after the manager of the sports team is fired, that you learn about what he or she didn't do well. You may find that to be a little harsh or maybe inaccurate, but that's somewhat of what I'm hearing. Not aimed at any particular past treasurer, just the fact that you're indicating that with this bill, you could do a lot better. It just says to me, without this bill, we haven't been doing better.
Well, I think the numbers speak for themselves. I mean, the investment performance, the investment results can look a lot better than they have in the past.
Appreciate that candor. Anyone? Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Suzanne Cahill. Suzanne, you're on mute. You have a minute
Hi.
left of your time. Sorry. Couldn't
Thank
resist.
you. Thank you to the committee for the time to discuss HB 6919. I wish I could be with you all, but I'm traveling to DC for an event this weekend. Again, I'm Suzanne Cahill. I'm the executive director and founder of the Wall Street Theater in Norwalk, a theater constructed in 1915, making it the second oldest operating theater in the state after the Shubert, but only by 1 year. We are a broadly accessible theater, purposely rebuilt in 2017 for staging Broadway-style performances, as well as a unique ability to live stream from internal production facilities. The theater has seen its share of live productions from musical theatrical performances, comedy, opera, dance, vaudeville, social media influences, and even current Oscar winners since its inception. We have a great story to tell. I am in full support of offering incentives to live production, but I would like to offer some suggestions on how this bill can benefit all Connecticut residents. Surprisingly, the most common request is not the old-fashioned Broadway tryout that used to define theaters in our state, particularly in New Haven. This was when a play would be staged in Connecticut for a short period to work out the kinks before landing a Broadway theater for an extended run. These days, producers are seeking places to develop shows that may have originated anywhere from Los Angeles to London to Litchfield. And their goal is not always Broadway. What they are interested in, first and foremost, by coming to Connecticut is the abundance of skilled professionals who understand stage production, educated and interested professionals, and residents who can provide input and who can afford the ticket price. If the goal of this legislation is to grow theater in Connecticut, there is no demonstrable difference between the costs, employment, and economic impact from any first-class production, Broadway or not. This bill should be amended to let equally important stage productions from an artistic and economic standpoint come to Connecticut without having to be solely Broadway.
30 seconds.
My second suggestion is to remove the limitation of eligibility for theaters having a capacity of 1,000. We have this capacity, but there are many occasions that pre-production events actively look to lower capacity. By definition, productions that have not been previously staged to have intimate following, so there is little guarantee of a sellout.
You've reached 3 minutes. Please summarize.
Okay. If the goal is to bring theater to Connecticut residents in a more dynamic way, we need to offer choice and suitability to those who wish to stage productions here. We shouldn't offer a single one-size-fits-all philosophy constrained by the idea of Broadway or by a mandate of capacity. Doing so runs the risk of not achieving the artistic and economic goals we all share. Let's be a state of inclusivity and not exclusive, working together to fuel the creative sparks to provide incentives for full stage performances, no matter if it's Broadway or anywhere else. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Suzanne, for your testimony. Any questions? Seeing none, before you go, I was just having a short discussion with Chairman Horn about how the amazing advances of this legislature. Certainly, I'm one who will be critical often of our inadequacies. But here's one where Ms. Cahill is traveling, I suspect, to an airport in the back seat of a vehicle, and she's testifying before the Finance Committee. If that isn't an advancement in our ability to make our government available to the people of Connecticut, I don't know what is. And I said a few weeks ago in a public hearing here, where there's a gentleman who was working in an industrial site in the backyard with tractor trailers passing by, and he was testifying from his phone before us. And here today is another example of how folks who could not make it to this building, or for whatever reason, they're infirm, they lack transportation, they have children to care for, they have job obligations, on and on and on. And as Representative Horns indicated, those that sit here all day long to testify, taking time off from work, losing a day's pay, whatever it might be. This is one where we ought to be recognized and express appreciation for how we have opened the doors to our government to so many more people. So thank you, Ms. Cahill, for your interest in this subject and for sharing your insights.
Thank you.
Thank you. Angela Rowles? You are on mute, Ms. Rowles.
Thank you. My name is Angela Rolls, and I'm the executive producer and CEO for Troika Entertainment. Troika Entertainment is a theatrical production company that has been producing touring Broadway musicals for nearly 30 years. Every year, our company launches between 5 and 10 new touring productions. And I am here in support of House Bill 6919, establishing a tax credit for certain pre-Broadway and post-Broadway productions. As was mentioned earlier by Anthony McDonald, the tech process is a lengthy process for us to get ready to launch a large national tour across the country. Most of our productions spend anywhere from $3 to $6 million putting a production together. And the city that we choose to tech a show in, and the theater that we choose, we bring our entire touring production of 50 to 60 people and an additional 25 to 35 creative staff and ancillary staff to that city to put up the shows. Of our production budgets, 50% of them are spent within the state that we are teching. And if we are lucky enough to have a state that also offers shops where we can build sets and costumes, that percentage goes up. I do want to address some of the questions that were brought up earlier in our process of how we choose a state. Obviously, the states that are offering tax incentives and tax credits are more desirable when we're spending this kind of money, and particularly post-COVID as we're trying to rebound our industry as a whole. Anthony mentioned several of the other states, Rhode Island and New York, in the area. There are also a few states in Illinois and Connecticut and Georgia that are offering tax credits. The benefit of Connecticut offering this tax incentive is that its proximity to New York. If I have a choice of going down to Kentucky versus Connecticut, obviously it's going to be much more convenient for us to come straight up to Connecticut to do the tax credit. To do the tech process. I also want to address the question of competition that someone raised earlier. As Anthony said, we have about 25 to 30 tours that launch every year. Most of them launch in the fall around the same time. So obviously every state can't support every tour. The state of Rhode Island, for example, has one theater that is suitable for tech. Maryland has two. Connecticut is unique in that there are at least 6 to 8 different theaters that we could be working in, and we could all be launching our tours at the same time. So we're not only bringing economic impact to one city in your state, but we have the opportunity to bring it to many. I will just close by saying that in terms of the educational aspects that we can also add value to the community, we've oftentimes set up workshops and invited, I think someone mentioned earlier, invited students in to watch the tech process. We almost always have an invited dress rehearsal where we can invite people in to watch the show. And then we will have our regular play at that theater for for the community and for as part of the subscription series. So I'm hoping that you will please take this bill into consideration, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much for your testimony, Representative Horn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And yes, thank you for being here. You may have heard that you've been tagged as the data person among them
Yes.
earlier in this meeting. And so let me follow up. That invitation came from other people, but to ask, so if we were to do as sort of a condition for this credit, to ask that those who participate in it produce some sort of data for us that can demonstrate its effectiveness. Obviously, what we're doing here in part is trying to build a business that is pretty small here right now. What would that data look like, and what kind of information would you, and I'm not talking about data that exists right now, I'm talking about that if you were to do a tech production here, while you're doing that production, what kind of data could you give to us, or might you be in a position to send in terms of the economic growth that this would create?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the other states, there is an application process where we in advance will outline our budgets and our anticipated spend in the state. On the other side of the production, we would then follow that up with exact information, exact numbers, as well as any sort of backup for auditing purposes. So there will be you would have a very specific dollar amount of exactly what was spent in the state. And I will say there is a comparison, as I said, you have eight to nine theaters, I believe, in your state that our tours typically stop at. They would normally only stop for, 6 performances or 8 performances maximum. So, from what we would spend in 1 week on our core touring company, that's almost doubled or quadrupled during the tech process. We're bringing additional people in with us, and we're staying for much longer amount of time. And the thing I didn't mention earlier, that also is extended work for your local stagehands. Rather than just being there for one load in and one load out in performances, we are hiring local stagehands throughout the entire technical process and tech rehearsals.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chairman Horn. Anyone else? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Kyrie Ambrosio.
Hi, good morning. Good morning, Senator Fonfara, Representative Hoare, Senator Martin, Representative Cheeseman, and members of the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify here today in favor of House Bill 6919, an act establishing a tax credit for certain pre-Broadway and post-Broadway theater productions. My name is Katie Ambrosio, and I'm here today on behalf of the members of the Greater New Haven and Quinnipiac Chambers of Commerce, here today as an advocate for businesses across the Greater New Haven region. The chambers represent over 1,200 businesses across 15 municipalities in the region, and our mission is to be an advocate for business, valuable resource for our members, a venue for connections, and a promoter of economic growth that is shared and inclusive. Critical component of economic growth is ensuring that we support the arts, culture, and tourism industries. The theater industry is critical to the vibrancy of the region and the state. They provide a much needed entertainment venue for Connecticut residents and even bring in out-of-state visitors with the productions and events they put on. By adding to the culture of our region, they also attract young and diverse talent to our employers. In addition, they're engaged in the community, and frequently they provide a community space. Just last month, they hosted the Schubert Theater hosted the Greater New Haven Chambers Internship, Career, and Job Fair, where they attracted almost just about 400 attendees looking for jobs and 40 businesses who were hiring. So I also have here today with me my colleague Elizabeth Herlihy, who is the Director of New Haven Engagement and Business Development, and who's also a member of the Board of Directors, to share a few words.
Thank you so much, Katie. Supporting this industry will have a large impact on so many other industries. The theaters in our region bring in a lot of business to industries such as restaurants, hotels, retailers, parking venues, and many more. As you may have seen, many New Haven business leaders submitted written testimony, including Geronimo's, Claire's Cornucopia, New Haven Hotel, Bear's Barbecue, the Anchor Spa, Jack's Steakhouse, Omni New Haven Hotel, and Yale University. Theaters have a natural ripple effect on the other businesses, providing economic opportunities for businesses all around. Ensuring the industry has long-term sustainable funding is critical to their continued contributions to our region. As a Schubert Board member, I witnessed the community impact that happened with Six the Musical tours, thankfully ending up in New Haven
30 seconds, please summarize.
to tech their productions. Both times the tour companies welcome students and community members to their dress rehearsals. I witnessed the actors engaging and inspiring the New Haven students, which was absolutely priceless. House Bill 6919 would provide a big economic opportunity. In behalf of the Greater New Haven Chamber, we respectfully request that you support HB 6919 to help pass it through your committee. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you both. Could you, for the record, we didn't get your name properly, or at least I did not. Could you just share with us your full name so we have that?
Absolutely. It's Elizabeth with a Z, and my last name is Herlihy, Herlihy.
We have you down here, but we didn't know you were testifying together, but great. Thanks very much. Question.
Thank you. Apologize for the confusion.
Thank you. Amy Migliori.
Good morning, members of the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee. My name is Amy Migliori. I represent New Haven Public Schools and more specifically Cooperative Arts and Humanities High School, a community partner of the Schubert Theater. I am an assistant principal and an arts director here at Co-op, and I have been a New Haven Public Schools arts educator for over 20 years. I am also on the Schubert Board of Directors. I am here in support of the bill 6919, establishing a tax credit for certain pre- and post-Broadway theater productions. I support this bill because not only does the Schubert teach technical theater in my high school by placing a full-time employee in our building, but my students directly benefit from technical rehearsals as they have been invited to be part of them on many occasions, and as Liz just talked about. They not only get to see the technical aspect of the show, they get a unique opportunity to talk with creative teams that create these Broadway shows. Therefore, students create a measurable relevance in their own learning by witnessing the professional aspect of technical theater at the Schubert during these productions. There is no price that can be put on these experiences for our young people. Master classes, internships, talkbacks with technical crews, apprenticeships are only a few of the benefits the Schubert Partnership provides to our students. These tax credits will help the Schubert continue to help us bring creative, inspiring, and real-world experiences for our students who would not otherwise have this arts access. I support this bill because it will directly impact the students of New Haven and our surrounding towns in immersing them in the art of theater, and we want this work to continue for our program, our students, and their future. So please support this bill. I thank you for your time and for allowing remote testimony so that I could continue to serve my students and my school today.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you for your testimony. Seeing no questions. Bree Deatley.
Good morning, Chair Fanfara, members of the committee. My name is Bree Deatley. I'm a consultant with Breezeway Consulting in Somerville, Mass, and I'm here representing the American Beverage Association, the manufacturers and distributors of refreshment beverages in Connecticut, and also our Connecticut bottlers, a couple of whom you'll be hearing from later on. We're here in support of Senate Bill 1236 to jerk you back from the Great White Way to the deposit law again. We are supportive of transferring more of and accelerating the transfer of the unclaimed deposits back from the state to the distributors to help them defray the costs, especially those brought on by Public Act 2158, which expanded the law and increased the handling fee that our companies are required to pay on each returned container. When the bottle law was passed in 1978, like all the other bottle bills in the United States, distributors were allowed to retain the unclaimed deposits to offset their expenses. And that changed in 2008 when Connecticut, like a number of other states, took those unclaimed deposits and used them to plug budget gaps. But when 2158 passed 2 years ago, there was a significant increase in the burden placed on distributors through the increased handling fee, which went up 75% for our members, the expansion of the law to more containers, and then the doubling of the deposit, which resulted in our companies handling many more containers. So we're looking at, there's some modeling that I've done that's in my written testimony. We're looking at a quadrupling of our outlays for the handling fee across the industry. We're looking at something like $250 million over 6 years of increased operating costs as a result of the law. And it's difficult, obviously, to make that up if we don't have access to the revenue that the system is generating, which is effectively the unclaimed deposits. We're appreciative of the transfer of some of the unclaimed deposits that happened as part of 2158. But as Chair Gresco said earlier this morning, additional funds are certainly needed to offset those expenses. And I want to be clear in my remarks, and from my modeling shows it in the written testimony that I've submitted, that the additional unclaimed deposits as a result of this bill would not come close to covering those costs, but they do go further towards offsetting a significant increase in those costs. We're looking at with regard to the deposit increase and the increased flow of containers, we're looking at across the entire beverage industry, probably issuing about $24 million in refunds for the last 6 months of this year, and probably issuing $66 million in refunds for the first half of next year. That's the cash crunch that the initial part of the law is designed to build up a cushion for the distributors to have funds to cover that initial outlay. And that doesn't account for the fact that there will be—
Please summarize your testimony.
Yep, thanks. That doesn't account for the fact that we know that the higher deposit is going to bring more containers in from across the borders. So appreciate the opportunity to testify. As I said, there's a lot of numbers in my testimony, written testimony, and I'm happy to go into those further if that would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Bree. Any questions? Seeing none. Marco Sequenza.
Hi. Hello. Good afternoon. 12:01. Hi, my name is Marco Sigüenza. I'm the owner of Jack's Bar and Steakhouse in New Haven. We're located almost right across the street from the Schubert Theater, and we are in full support of 6919 because we see the changes that whenever the Schubert Theater has any kind of function in there, we see the amount of people that come through the doors. It's incredible. We have about 30 employees 30 families that live from our business. And when something like this happens, when the Schubert Theater is having any kind of function, we have to we get everybody to come to work. Everybody's happy. Everybody lives from that. We have, besides the 30 families we support with the employees, we end up buying more liquor, more food, there's also more culture that comes into to the city. That helps everybody. That's an incredible tool. Please see this as not as an expense, see it as an investment that is done for the city of New Haven, and for all of the other theaters that are in Connecticut. That's an incredible tool that we hope you take in consideration, and you help us all from this. As I said, this is just an incredible tool. We humbly suggest you take a look at this and please implement this to help us all. I remember you were talking about getting the younger generations to come, and that we already have in there. We have the Yale students that are coming. Yale, not only Yale, we have a Quinnipiac, Southern. They're coming to see the shows. So that's the answer that to the question that you have for Anthony McDonald. The students are also coming to the theater. They're coming to enjoy the shows, and they're coming to eat afterwards, to come to the restaurants and be part of the scene that we provide, all combined. When the Schubert opens its doors with the great shows they provide, it all blooms. It's an incredible amount of people that we see in town, and everybody is just, it becomes a city that's just, it says we're alive, we're here. We're here to be part of this. We all want to be part of this. I'm a father of 3 myself, and I bring including my kids to those shows. I have a 7-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 2-year-old. We love going to the Schubert Theater, and we love going to the shows, and then to the restaurants that are there. So that in this tiny little bit, in a tiny little way, it explains how everything works
3
out.
minutes, please summarize.
Please take us in consideration. This is a great opportunity for the city of New Haven to start blooming again. It already does, but it can go a little further. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. I think the industry should hire you as chief spokesperson.
Thank you so much.
Seeing none. Thomas Perugia, I apologize for
There you go.
seeing you. But you have
No, that was pretty good. That was pretty good. Thank you. Hello, good morning, everyone. I'm Tom Perugia. I'm the Director of Governmental Affairs with the Broadway League. We submitted written testimony, so I'm just going to present a brief summary of what we've provided. We are the trade association for the commercial theatrical industry. We represent about 700 different members, general managers, producers, presenters. We represent the Bushnell, the Oakdale, the Schubert Theater, the Palace Theater, and several other Connecticut-based arts organizations. So we, of course, would like to support House Bill 6505. One of the most compelling aspects of these programs that exist in other states, and we would love to see one in Connecticut as well, is that the incentive is entirely results-driven, as an applicant must first demonstrate investment before becoming eligible to apply for the credit. Since 2008, when the Illinois theatrical incentive took effect, approximately 22 equity Broadway shows or tours have launched from the state. Since 2012, when the Rhode Island incentive took effect, 10 equity Broadway shows or tours have launched from the state. As a result of New York's incentive, the state has also seen a boom in mounting theatrical productions. While almost no Broadway tours teched in New York State during the 5 years preceding enactment of the state's program in 2015, approximately 30 national tours will have launched from New York by the end of 2023. Buffalo, Rochester, and Syracuse had never been sites of the show's launch before the tax credit. As an illustration of the potential for economic impact, the Disney's The Lion King 2017 tech period and launch in Syracuse, New York, resulted in 4,251 hotel nights booked by production team members and an estimated economic impact of more than $14 million from the businesses patronized by theatergoers and production staff. The show directly employed 163 local stagehands who worked for more than 21,000 hours. While The Lion King is a specific example of a larger production, the findings of the Broadway League's 2017 touring economic impact report, the last report for which we have full data, we are now working on a newer draft. As you know, there was no theater for the last couple of years. That report demonstrates that even a more modestly budgeted show can generate millions of dollars in economic activity. Accordingly, I support my colleagues in their endeavor to endorse 6505 and urge the legislature to consider it and to enact it into law. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Thomas. Appreciate your testimony. Seeing no questions. Gardner Frischia.
Hello. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gardner Frisha, and I represent the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees, Local 74 of Southern Connecticut, and I'm here in support of a tax bill 6919, tax credits for post and pre-Broadway tours. Our over 220 members and several hundred overhires work in the various venues and scenic shops here in Connecticut that support the touring Broadway industry. HB 6919 is very important to the men and women of Local 74 and their families, as well as very important to our employers and the venues. This will create hundreds of jobs, resulting in many added weeks of work and benefits to our membership that we would otherwise not have. Our venues have a long storied history of doing production work for touring productions, and the skill set of our crews is known around the country for being top notch. In fact, myself and many of our members spent years touring with these shows and understand how important it is to tech a show in a venue with skilled crews, as well as have the support of the scenic shops, which are here in Connecticut as well. We have many wonderful venues, including the Schubert Theater in New Haven, the Palace Theater in Waterbury, the Bushnell Theater in Hartford, Palace Theater in Stamford, and several others, which would be appropriate for different types of shows, whether they be an intimate play or a big, heavy musical. Our venues can accommodate any type of attraction. I'd like to thank everybody for their time, and myself and our membership seriously will hope that you consider all of this and support House Bill 6919. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Representative Cheeseman, Mr. Tricia has a question for you.
Yes.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Approximately how many members do you have in Connecticut?
We have over 200. We have about 220 members in our local, in Local 74. And there's about another 200 members in the Hartford local, which is Local 84. So between both those locals, it's about 400, 450 members. Plus, as I said, we have several hundred extras, helpers that work with us, extra members that we utilize that don't have union cards, but will work when we need extra people as well.
So are you all varieties of trades, carpenters, electricians, all that within this union? How does your membership break down?
We cover all aspects of the production work. We represent everybody on stage, backstage. So from anybody from carpenters to electricians, prop people, sound people, video people. We also cover all of the theatrical wardrobe, hair, makeup, everything that everything that comprises backstage on a show is through our union. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions. Tom Straley.
Good afternoon, Chairman Horn and Chairman Fonfara. My name is Tom Straley, and I'm speaking here on behalf of Pepsi-Cola in Bristol, Connecticut, a 75-year-old independent family-owned franchise, to strongly urge your support of SB 1236. Pepsi Bristol's territory comprises 17 towns in Connecticut, from Bristol, Meriden over to Southbury. And this bill takes a meaningful step to help beverage distributors and manufacturers, deposit initiators, we're the one that initiate the nickel, defray the costs associated with the bottle deposit redemption system by enabling these companies to retain a larger portion of the escheats or the unclaimed deposits. Significantly, prior to the first expansion of the bottle bill to water in 2008, deposit initiators were allowed to keep 100% of the unclaimed deposits in recognition of the handling fees and other expenses that we've incurred to administer the system. In 2021, the legislature expanded the bill to further include juices, teas, and sports drinks, effective January 1st, 2023. We're only a couple of months into it. An increase to deposit from 5 to 10 cents beginning in January of 2024. The legislation also significantly increased the handling fee by 75% from 2 cents to 3.5 cents. SB 1236 begins to address this gross inequity. Bill would, one, allow deposit initiators to return balances outstanding in the special account for the purpose of reimbursement of the 10-cent refund value for redeemed beverage containers that commenced January 1st, 2024, and reduce the percentage of unclaimed beverage container deposits that are required to be paid by the deposit initiators, distributors like us, for deposits to the general fund. We strongly urge support of SB 1236. It's long overdue, in my opinion. If there are any questions, I'll entertain them at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Straley. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much to the committee.
Mr. Wenig, we need you to accept our promotion to be able to testify today. Could you do that, sir? Mr. Wenig, could you accept the promotion? If not, we'll come back to you. Okay. Eric Getty.
Good afternoon. My name is Eric Getty, here on behalf of the Connecticut Business and Industry Association and in support of Bill 6922 on operating loss carry forward periods. This is a relatively straightforward bill, but a very important one that would further incentivize corporations to spend resources developing new products, which ultimately leads to economic and employment growth in the state. For new businesses or those businesses in cyclical industries, you often have years of losses before you break even or become profitable. This credit allows you to deduct those losses on future tax returns and allows taxation based on average profitability over time. As you heard earlier, the problem is that of the states with a corporate tax, Connecticut's NOL policy is among the least competitive in the nation. Most states allow for an 80% deduction over a 20-year period or have no limitations at all. Connecticut law only allows a deduction up to 50% of liability over a 20-year period. Now, while what sets Connecticut apart from other states is our allowed deduction percentage, we recognize that while the state is headed in a positive economic direction, which presents an opportunity to provide much needed tax relief to the business community, we still want to be careful and obviously don't want to go back to the years of the cycle of deficits followed by tax increases. So we are fully supportive of the committee's effort to maintain the percentage while extending the number of years, because it is our belief that is likely to have the least revenue impact to the state while allowing businesses to deduct their losses. We're also supportive of an earlier suggestion to allow this extension for investments already made by businesses in our state. So with that, certainly appreciate the committee raising this important concept in their efforts to make Connecticut's corporate tax structure more competitive with other states, and certainly happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you for your testimony today. Has Mr. Wenig accepted the promotion? He has. Mr. Wenig, you have the floor, sir. You are on mute if you are testifying. Going once. Well, we're getting there. We'll come back. Carolyn Shorkey.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good morning or good afternoon. My name is Carolyn Shorkey and I'm with Anthony Auglier Inc. in East Haven, Connecticut. And I'm here to support the HB 6919, establishing a tax credit for pre and post Broadway theater productions. My company and I support this bill because Auglieros has been a part of the Broadway community since 1910. We started with horse and wagon hauling shows for the Schubert Theater in New Haven, and we currently still help the Broadway community within the United States, in New York City, and we still continue to help the Schubert in New Haven. So this bill would directly impact my company because we're involved with hauling, transporting, and storing the theatrical effects related to the show, to the Broadway shows. And it would continue bringing jobs to my company so we can hopefully be here another 100 years and be part of the Schubert and the Bushnell and the other local theaters that bring in shows every year. The bill can increase the businesses surrounding the theaters, restaurants, shops, hotels. So everybody works together in this industry, in this Broadway community. And most importantly, the local shops that build and tech these shows, they will have more business. It allows us to have more business, and the local theaters can continue bringing these live entertainment shows to everybody that they've brought. Live entertainment was the original form of entertainment for families, so it's a good way to continue supporting that and supporting this community. So thank you everyone for your time.
Thank you, Carolyn. Questions? Thank you. Mike DeFeo. Is Mr. DeFeo? No. Jennifer Jennings.
All right. Last but not least, or maybe just last today, which is exciting. All right. Good afternoon, because it's now afternoon, members of the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony in support of HB 6921, an act concerning the amount of apprenticeship tax credit for the construction trades. My name is Jen Jennings. I'm the Executive Director of the Connecticut Heating and Cooling Contractors Association, CHCC. We represent the interest of 85% of the HVAC construction industry statewide. I'm going to echo Representative Acker earlier, who mentioned it's so nice to see so many bills that are all supported in here. So it's lovely. I think it's important to look at the intent of policy behind tax credits. They are generally designed to encourage or reward certain types of behavior that are considered beneficial to not only the economy or the environment, but to further any purpose of the government deems important in our state. In this case, it is to encourage training and workforce development within the construction trades. This bill is specifically looking at the increase in the amount. I know you had questions earlier as to why for the increase, and inflation certainly goes along with it. But as Representative Ackert mentioned, the increase in salary and wages, but also the increase in training costs, because ultimately this tax credit is a reward for the training costs. And it really is the other four-year degree. It's not going to college, but it takes 4 years to make an apprentice a license holder. So the inflation element certainly goes into, and it's been years since we've increased the tax credit. So we're looking at going from $4,000 to $7,500. I think it's also important to look at how it's awarded. The tax credit comes in at the end, so upon completion. And if you look at the way the form is set up, the contractor, the business owner, does not get the credit annually when he's completing for that particular year, but at the end of the 4 years. So if an apprentice leaves the company, maybe they live in Stamford and moved to Stratford, and now they are picked up by an employer up there. So although they're still in the trade and still working, they're now working for a Stratford area company. The employer who trained them for the past 3 years and paid for the training experience does not get anything. And then not the full $4,000, but whatever the portion, the proration of the credits left, is what the completing contractor would get. So they might not actually ever receive the full tax credit. So possibly that's something to look at, is to have it available annually upon the completion of that prorated portion, because 30 seconds. Oh my goodness, I need to keep going. Okay, so affordable housing, energy, heat pumps, indoor air quality in our schools. Obviously, there's significant demand in this industry right now. Securing a license is a lifetime of income tax that they will be paying. It will secure a position here in the state of Connecticut. Once they receive their license, it's highly likely that they will stay here working in the state of Connecticut. It's also, I think it would be prudent to talk about the expansion of the tax credits. Currently, only C Corps have access to them. It would be nice to expand it to LLCs and S Corps and other small businesses who are looking to expand on their training as well. And it would encourage the ability to compete. I think that maybe is about it. And as far as I did also hear it come up earlier about encouraging our trades in middle school, I think it is very important. The trades are certainly a pathway out of poverty. It is not incurring the debt of college. It is a pathway to actually learn and earn as you go. I was recently in Hartford at Prince Tech, looking at scholarship applications for our the plumbing and heating students there. It is definitely a lot of opportunity if we can just expand exposure to get these kids in middle school to understand. And there's a lot of growth here in this industry here in Connecticut. Thank you.
Thank you. But Prince Tech is a high school.
Correct.
So is it late at that point?
It is. I really think there needs to be exposure in the middle school. We've got a lot of kids that are hands-on. They possibly do. I've got one of my own 7th grader, does wonderful on all of his science labs. And then you take the exact same content and you ask him to apply it on an assessment, and the grade does not match the A+ from the lab because the lab was hands-on and the test isn't he's hands-on. I think if we encouraged or had a lot more opportunity for using hammers, we wouldn't need as many fidget spinners. If we had more hands-on programs and classes, it would provide the exposure. And then when they hit 9th grade, they might consider trade school.
So how can your industry or your association help with this?
The association certainly supports expanding shops, bringing shops back into our general regular education programs. And we definitely support our technical high school system.
Right, but if that hasn't happened, and
so there's a hiring restriction. That hiring ratio that I know Representative Ackert was explaining earlier, there's the job site ratio of 1-to-1, and then there's that hiring ratio of 3-to-1.
I'm speaking to the introduction of this opportunity in the middle school years and how your association can participate in that introduction.
The association would encourage, and we do go to job fairs. Unfortunately, there's not many job fairs at the middle school level.
Why would there be?
Right, but we have these kids that have to make these decisions. If you don't enter trade school as a freshman,
right,
there's some opportunity as a sophomore, but beyond that, because of the modules and the requirements, you cannot enter into these licensed trade programs as a junior or a senior. There's one tech school in our state, which is tremendous. I think the model should be emulated throughout, is the Bristol, Connecticut model at Bristol Technical High School. You can enter as a junior or senior, but the others don't allow for that. So I think you could probably expand the offerings if we expanded that model, let kids go to their primary school and maybe pick up their electives at the technical high schools, but somehow getting more exposure, opening it up, getting the trades into, not viewing them as less than. The opportunity is absolutely tremendous in this industry.
I guess what I'm asking is how your association can be part of the solution of introducing at these earlier grades, which I totally agree with. But we talk about it all the time, and yet I don't know if it's has to be government that does this. Why associations like yours that, as Representative Ackert said earlier, the average age of folks in the trade is older than we'd like. And so how I'd be interested in hearing, if you don't have an answer today, how your association and others can participate in this introduction at earlier years so that they can make a choice. Granted, it is our obligation in terms of the VOTEC schools to reach into the middle schools earlier instead of, as I always say, it's the father who went to a trades VOTEC school, the brother that's going, or the friend that is going to go. That is still the main way in which young people are introduced to the VOTEC system. That's not very intentional.
No, you're right. It's not. It's just not enough exposure early enough. And I know there is legislation this year that did look at it. Actually, the Education Committee just had it, I believe last week was the hearing on workforce development that did do exactly this, expand the exposure into the middle schools. So for the association, we would love to definitely get into the middle schools, talk to the kids, talk about the opportunities inside the trades. I've been in the trade myself for the past 18 years, as a female, and that's certainly something that's significantly lacking for sure in the trades. But to get in there, I also sit on a local board of education, and I can tell you that the trades are not encouraged. They're not encouraged all the way through, but they're definitely not saying, come on in and talk to us about exposure to the trades in 7th and 8th grade, which is crucial because that's the time period that these kids need to make that decision if they're going to go to trade school for high school.
Thank you very much. Chairman Horn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so to my co-chair's point about, we're talking about exposure, which isn't necessarily obviously like encouraging a 7th grader to take a job. And I have in my community, I worked with a couple of people from the trades who had established something called Touch a Trade, which is a nonprofit organization which tries to do exactly what you suggest. It's aiming at the middle school kids, and it's not vocational yet, but it just exposes them to people, and to your point, also making a point of women working in these trades, and to see them working and to learn simple things like how to properly swing a hammer. And it's quite contagious. And I wonder whether your organization has worked with any organizations like that or nonprofits like that to try to find other ways to expose kids, to let them know there's a path forward that is that is hands-on.
We've recently looked at working with and spoken at length with the Boys and Girls Club here in Hartford, and also some of the police athletic leagues to talk about opportunities on exposure, to come into some of the clubs, which often have some of these middle school students in them, to provide scholarship opportunities, whether it be to purchase the tools for them to get started, and also to do some job shadowing. The technical high schools have a work-based learning program. But again, you've got to get them somehow exposed to understanding these options are available. So if there were opportunities to encourage, and I don't know how you blanket it to boards of education, to your local boards throughout the state, to really just encourage this conversation. We're big on pushing kids, not that I'm against Algebra 1 and Algebra 2 and the math tracks and the science tracks, but what about these hands-on experiences? And somehow along the way, we've removed automotive, we've removed wood shop, all these classes came out. And then, two-part, you look at these tax credits and how these are offered, and it's supposed to be to encourage businesses to hire, but it would be amiss to not take into consideration that hiring restriction. And you have all of this opportunity now to encourage, but then we have a state regulated restriction that doesn't allow the contractor to hire.
And to continue that part of it, a lot of the conversation we've had with today is about the inflow and other, encouraging kids to see a path forward and to join and become apprentices. How do we also have to, of course, measure to make sure that this isn't a dead end and that they're actually getting the training they need to be fully fledged, journeymen to get licensed to do this work. And there has been some programs work better than others, and there's some question about whether we as a state actually have full visibility into which programs are working in terms of, because it's obviously a lower rate of pay. So we want to bring people in, but we also want to make sure it is that path forward doesn't stop there, that it continues. So how do you suggest we look at that?
When you say lower rate of pay, it's challenging to become an apprentice, with a family, very challenging, because it's a process. It's 4 years worth of on the job hours that you need to acquire in addition to your classroom hours. When we've talked about, as the minimum wage has increased, that was never a problem for CHEC and for our association, because we're always ahead of them to begin with. I know you heard earlier about how it's half of the journeyman's pay where the Department of Labor sets the initial entry. But all of our members are certainly north of $15 an hour for sure. Matter of fact, we actually surveyed our members this past summer, and many of them HVAC contractors. I don't know if you've tried to hire one, but if you Memorial Day weekend or 4th of July rolls around and you have no AC at your house, you're probably pretty upset and it's pretty toasty and it's very hard to get one. Majority of our members, upward of 50% of them, were not taking new customers. If you didn't already have a contract with them, they just didn't have the availability to go out. But when we surveyed them this summer, they're paying their apprentices between $20 and $27 an hour for the apprentice. Who, that's definitely a decent wage.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And I don't want you to take my comments and questions as suggesting that the lower rate of pay for an apprentice is inappropriate. It is a training position.
Right.
However, it's also a pathway to something else.
Right.
It's not meant to be a permanent place for these people to be. And so I'm just making the point that I think we have to be just careful to look to make sure it's working, that these are actually, it is a continued pathway.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Horn. Representative Cheeseman.
Thank you. Thank you for being here today. You mentioned the investment that the employers are making and the cost of the training, and that we're discussing a tax credit. So can you talk about that investment in terms of the training, the hours you put in before someone is really able to be productive when they've learned enough there? So I'm just curious as to, can you put a figure on that?
I can't put an actual dollar amount per se on it, but if you were to send out, so the job site ratio and while the apprentice is training is 1-to-1. So you're sending out your one licensed technician, maybe the technician's getting $30, $35. We'll use our round numbers of $30 an hour, maybe for the technician, and $15 an hour for the apprentice. So you've got a $45 an hour team going out there. The licensed technician is not moving through the job as quickly as he would if he were there on his own, because that journeyman is now taking the time to teach the apprentice as they go through. So less productive in terms of getting work done. So you've got that investment into the dollar amount, right, of both of them going there, and you're scaling back on how much production is getting done. But you're also taking the time to invest in making sure that apprentice, in the beginning, it's residential primarily is where we see a lot of our apprentices start out in the beginning. But you are taking the time to invest in not only the hourly rate that you're paying the apprentice and the journeyman to be out there, but the meetings afterwards, the association meetings, a lot of them come to understand the opportunity in this industry, product training, exposure on some of the NATE credentials and manufacturers training on some of the different products specifically. So you're spending a lot of time in both the work hours and even after work hours, which overtime for apprentices even is out there too.
And time is money.
And time is money.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
That's great.
Well,
Thank you.
Senator Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, Jennifer. Great testimony. Thank you so much. You've clarified some things. And I just want to be clear on one of the things that you mentioned regarding the $7,500 or currently $4,000 credit, apprenticeship credit. Am I correct in what I heard is that you may train someone for 3 years and then they leave and they go to another employer and you receive none of that credit? Is that correct?
Correct.
Wow.
So you don't receive it until the completion. And that's a problem inside the regulation as is anyway, with the way apprenticeship is set up. We terminate the apprenticeship. So the business owner, the contractor, gets a termination in their file if you've only gotten someone through 3 years. So it's a bad look for that contractor as if they didn't complete them. But we never stop to say, well, where did they go? Did they leave the industry? Did they, and we did lose them in the industry. They put 3 years in and then they just walked away. Or are they with another employer still in the industry? So truly completing their apprenticeship. But because the way 85% of the industry, that non-union sector is tracked. It just looks like it's a termination.
Right.
So it would be really great if that tax credit was able to be used annually.
Are you aware of any other tax credits, apprenticeship tax credits, such as the manufacturing sector, if that's handled in the same way?
Well, you guys did a tremendous job with the manufacturing tax credit, and certainly I think the economy is showing the greatness that you did do with that. I am not certain how that one is paid out, and I think I will actually go look that up and probably follow up with you guys on that.
And I'll be following up myself as well, because you've shed some light on this, because I wasn't aware of that. And regarding the getting to the middle schools sooner, I totally agree with that. I think, I went on a workforce development, met with 30 different stakeholders throughout the state, including trades, higher ed, superintendent of schools, looking at different career paths. And one of the things that we got out of that, and we've been hearing from the manufacturing sector and the trades, we sort of have stigmatized the trades and the manufacturing sector for decades. And I'm talking about 40 plus years that we've been doing this. And the module or the curriculums have been by school districts has been, you're going to college, and to be successful, you needed to have a 4 or 2-year degree. Unfortunately, we've created this image of the trades and the manufacturing sector, and now we need to try to fix that. And I couldn't agree with what's being said regarding the amount of schooling, the education, the exposure that's required. Grandparents, parents needing to talk to their children about the trades and manufacturing sector. And let's be real clear, it's not only those industries, but it's all, there's so many different career paths that we need to be sharing with our students and our children. But it's our job to try to figure that out. And I think John's question is great, is okay, what can the trades do to try to get that exposure to the
Sooner.
kids, and sooner than later? I know we're going to try to do it here at our end, legislatively wise, and encouraging the educators to, hey, let's start speaking to our children in the middle schools, regardless of whatever career it may be. Let's start talking to them now, so that we can tie the work skills needed with the business community with what the children need to be taught. So, but thank you for testifying. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
It would be great if there was an opportunity to identify aptitude of a student who's maybe tracking into that hands-on. And we have so many students now who our expectation to keep a kid sitting, to keep a child sitting for 6.5 hours a day in all of these classes in front of computers. I even look at the STEM and STEAM labs that are going in all over the place, and you can design and do your blueprints on a computer, on an iPad, but that's not going to build the building. You still need the plumber to pipe it, and you need the electrician to run the wire. And the student who can't sit still necessarily and do the design, if instead of necessarily extra recesses, or again, back to the fidget spinners and all the accommodations we give them, I think we could have a lot of students who would really enjoy a hands-on class, and it gives that break during the day. And if they had access to that in middle school, it might say, maybe I should continue down this pathway.
You're absolutely correct. And I like this touch of trade, learning how to swing a hammer. I'll be happy to teach anybody here on the committee how to swing a hammer. So.
Unless there's anyone else, I would just say that it's not the first time this conversation been had in this room and other rooms in this building over the last, I don't know how many years. And yet you're still here with the same issue. And I'll say it again. We're not intentional. We're not intentional. And that's really sad. As a society, government can only do so much.
An interesting tidbit I'd gotten the other day from a nurse, so different industry. We were talking about colonoscopies. So I guess maybe the GI doc we could think of as a human plumber for a minute, and how much the the GI doc gets paid. So I think it was Medicare, they were saying pays a flat fee of $3,000 for the colonoscopy. And the nurse said to me, how much do you think the GI doc gets? I didn't even know where to begin. Half, 1,500, maybe the other half to the facility. It was $120. So the anesthesiologist gets their share, the hospital and the facility, the drugs, then everything else gets their share, but $120 to the human plumber. Well, you can't get a plumber. I don't know if anyone here has tried to hire a plumber recently or had a need, but you can't even get the plumber out to your house to diagnose your clogged toilet for that fee right now. So with the costs escalating and the demand is certainly there with indoor air quality, like I said, and all the green initiatives and certainly the housing affordability and housing shortage. We want to talk about housing affordability, look at the cost to build, but the demand and the lack of tradespeople right now, the aging out of the trades, it's this next generation just doesn't have that same maybe exposure, I suppose, because we keep tracking everybody to college and we're missing out on this pathway.
Thank you for your testimony today.
Thank you very much. Have a great day or weekend.
And unless Mr. Moore and Mr. Phelan have interest in testifying today, I think we've exhausted the list. Thank you. Representative Horn.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. I just want to take one personal moment to congratulate Finance Committee member Representative Paletta on his recent engagement. Nice to end on that note. New beginnings. Yes, to a Democrat. Thank you, Representative Wood. Yeah, there we go. Mixed marriage. May that be a model for us. With that, I believe we are adjourned. Thank you.